Good evening. Settle in wherever you are. Turn the lamp down or off entirely if you like, and let the room get a little dim around the edges, because we are going to be here for a while, and there is nothing in tonight's story that requires your full attention. If you fall asleep in the first 10 minutes, you have used this correctly. Most nights, when we go into a great house of the past, we go up the front steps, past the boot scraper and the polished brass, through a hall that smells of beeswax and cut flowers, and then up a wide staircase to the rooms where the interesting people are supposed to be. Tonight, we are going the other way. Tonight, we go down a narrow flight of stone steps at the side of the house, below the level of the pavement, past the iron railings, through a door that no guest has ever used and never will, into a room where the ceiling is low and the floor is stone and the windows look out at ankle height onto a little sunken yard. This is the kitchen, and the woman who runs it is the person we are going to spend the next few hours with. You almost certainly have a picture of her already, and I want to take it away from you before we start, because it will get in the way. The picture is this: a large woman, red in the face, standing in a cloud of steam with her sleeves pushed up past the elbow. She is shouting at a girl. She is banging a pan down on the table. She has flour on her forearms and a temper that everyone in the house steps carefully around, and she exists in the story only as a sound coming up through the floorboards, or as a comic obstacle when the mistress of the house comes down to complain about the soup. She is background. She is furniture that speaks. In the version of the Victorian dinner party that most of us have inherited, from novels and from television and from 100 careful reconstructions of drawing rooms, the food simply arrives. It appears at the door of the dining room on a footman's arm, hot and correct and in the right order, and the story is about the people who eat it. That version is not just incomplete, it has the intelligence of the household almost exactly backwards. Here is what I want to put in its place, and it is the reason we are going down the stairs tonight rather than up them. On the evening we are about to live through, 16 people will sit down to dinner in a house in Bloomsbury. There will be a hostess at that table who has spent 3 weeks arranging it. She has chosen the guests, written the invitations, worked out the seating, and she will spend the evening steering the conversation and watching the room, and she will be very good at it. She knows the names, she knows the connections, she knows who married whose sister, and whose father lost money in the 70s, and who must on no account be placed next to whom. And downstairs, 2 floors below her, standing at a table with a pencil and a list, there is a woman who knows things about those same 16 people that the hostess has never once suspected. She knows which of the gentlemen cannot take a rich sauce, and has known it for 2 years, and knows that he has never admitted it aloud to anybody. She knows which lady will leave shellfish untouched on the plate, no matter how it is dressed, every single time, without comment. She knows which household keeps fish on a Friday and which one only says it does. She knows who eats a great deal and who eats almost nothing and who eats nothing at table and then asks for a tray later. She knows which guests praise everything and which one will send back a plate with a single bite taken from it and mean something by it. She knows whose cook is better than she is, and therefore who will be quietly measuring the evening against a standard. She knows all of this because she has read it, not in letters and not in conversation. She has read it in what came back down the stairs. That is the thing I find genuinely remarkable about a Victorian cook of the upper sort, and it is the thesis of tonight. She was the best informed person in the house, and her sources were plates. Everything that went up came back, and everything that came back had been marked by the person who received it. Eaten clean, eaten half, pushed aside, cut into and abandoned, sauce scraped to the rim of the plate, bread crumbled and not touched at all. 16 people, one after another, told her something true about themselves every time they were fed, and they had no idea they were doing it, because they did not think of her as a person who could be told anything. They thought the food came from nowhere. She also had the other half of the system, which is the part that gets forgotten even more thoroughly. You had colleagues. The footmen who cleared the table had ears. The ladies' maids and valets who came with their employers to a dinner sat in the servants' hall and talked. The butcher's boy served 6 houses on one street, and the fishmonger served a dozen, and both of them knew exactly which household had begun paying its bills late. Information moved sideways along the basements of London with a speed and a reliability that the drawing rooms above never matched, and a cook of any experience sat at a junction of that network and simply collected. So she kept a book, not the household account book, which the mistress could ask to see at any time, and not the menu book that went up and down the stairs each morning. Her own book, in pencil, in her own hand, with a page or a half-page for each household that had ever dined at this table. What was served, what came back, what was asked for twice, what was refused, and whether it was refused politely or with a look. This was not sentimentality, and it was not gossip for its own sake. It was a professional file. It was the working memory of a woman whose reputation depended on producing, on a single specific evening, several hours of food that would be received as effortless by 16 people whose habits she had to have anticipated in advance, from below, without ever being introduced to a single one of them. And she would do all of that on the same day she cooked 2 breakfasts, a luncheon, the servants' dinner, and the nursery meals, from one fire, in a basement, with 2 girls under her, and a coal range that had to be lit from cold. That is what we are going to do tonight. One day, one kitchen, a tall terraced house in Bloomsbury, in the year 1883. We are going to start before 6 in the morning, in the dark, in a kitchen that smells of cold iron, because the range went out at 11 the night before, and has to be brought back to life from paper and cinders. We are going to work through the whole thing in order: the fire and the coal, the 2 breakfasts, the bell at the area door, and the tradesmen arriving, one after another, with things you did and did not order. The trip up to the morning room with clean hands to have the day's menu decided, which is a negotiation conducted so politely that neither party will ever say out loud who won it. The long, simmering work of the middle of the day, the stocks and the jellies and the ice that has to be bought by the block. The luncheon nobody will remember. The moment in the middle of the afternoon when 3 things go wrong at once, and nobody upstairs is ever going to hear about any of them. The last 2 hours before 8 o'clock, when the timing of about 30 separate items has to be held in one head. And then the dinner itself, which you will not see, because you are 2 floors below it, reading the whole evening in the plates as they come back. We will finish near midnight, with the copper cooling on its shelves and the range banked for tomorrow and 1 candle, while you make your notes. Everything in it is drawn from real material. Household account books survive. So do the wage records, the tradesmen's bills, the coal deliveries, the cookery manuals that professional cooks actually trained from, and the recollections of the people who did this work and later wrote it down. We can put real figures on what a turbot cost and what a cook was paid, and how much coal a house like this burned in a week, and I will give you those figures as we go, because the numbers are half the story. A dinner for 16 was an industrial operation running out of a low-ceilinged room with a stone floor, and it was managed by one woman on a salary you could fit into a coat pocket. If you enjoy these, a subscribe helps more than you would think, and it costs you nothing but a tap. And I always like reading where everybody is, so if you are still awake, leave a comment telling me what time it is where you are, and what the weather is doing outside your window. Some of you are listening at 2 in the afternoon in bright sun, and some of you are listening at 4 in the morning with the heating clicking on, and I like knowing both. Now let the room go soft. Let your shoulders come down off your ears. You have nothing to do for the next couple of hours except be somewhere else. The year is 1883. The city is London. The month is October, and it has rained in the night, so the pavement above your head is wet, and the sound of a cartwheel comes down through the grating in a way that will be with you all day. Come down the stone steps with me. Come down the stone steps with me. There are 7 of them, and they are wet this morning, and the iron handrail is cold enough that you take it with the inside of your fingers rather than gripping it. At the bottom is a small paved well, about the width of 2 people standing shoulder to shoulder, sunk below the level of the street, with railings overhead and a coal hole cover set into the pavement beside them. This is the area. Everything that enters this house that is not a guest enters here. Meat, fish, milk, coal, ice, letters for the servants, the laundry going out and coming back, and you, 4 years ago, with a box and a written character in your pocket. The door is unlocked because the scullery maid has been up since 5:15, and it swings into a passage with a stone floor and whitewashed walls, and the first thing that reaches you is the smell of a dead range. Cold iron has a smell. If the iron is old and has been black-leaded 1,000 times and has had fat spitting onto it every day for 20 years, it is a flat, mineral, faintly sour smell, and it is the smell of a kitchen that is not yet working. In an hour it will be gone, and you will not think of it again until tomorrow. The second thing is the light. The kitchen window faces the area, so it looks not out, but up, and what comes through it at this hour is a pale grey column of light, with the shadow of the railings printed across it. It falls on the corner of the deal table, and it does not reach the far wall at all. For the rest of the day, the room will run on gas and candle and firelight, and that light coming down through the railings is the only piece of the outside world the room is given. Stand still a moment and let the shape of it settle. The kitchen is the largest room in the basement, low in the ceiling, wide in the floor, with a stone flag floor, scrubbed pale, and a scrubbed deal table down the middle of it that is worth more to you than anything else in the house. The range is set into the chimney breast on the long wall, black, banked and dead, with a hot closet beside it, and the boiler behind a small iron door on its left. Above the range hangs a rack of iron pot lids in descending order of size. Along the opposite wall stands the dresser, 7 feet of it, with the everyday plates ranged on their edges and the copper stewpans below, and hooks along the front edge where the ladles and the skimmers and the trussing needles hang. Under the window is the sink, though the real washing happens through the doorway in the scullery, where there is a second sink, a copper for boiling, and the wooden racks. Beyond that, a passage, and off the passage, the larder with its marble slab and its slate shelf, the fish larder, the wine cellar you do not have the key to, and the coal cellar you have too much to do with. At the end of the passage is the servants' hall, which is a table and 8 chairs and a fireplace and a print of a cathedral that nobody has ever mentioned. Above your head, and this matters more than it sounds, is a house of 4 stories. You are 38 years old. You are the cook of this house, and you have been the cook of this house for 4 years, and before that, you were the kitchen maid and then the cook in 2 other households, one of them in the country, which is where you learned game, and where you learned what a badly built oven does to a person's temper. You are paid £35 a year. It comes to you quarterly, which means £8 and 15 shillings 4 times a year, handed over in the morning room with a small ceremony that both of you find slightly uncomfortable. On top of that, you are fed, you sleep in the house, you have your tea and sugar allowance, and you have your beer money, and you have the perquisites of the kitchen, which we will come to later this morning, because they are more interesting and more complicated than they sound. £35 is a good wage, not a grand one. A cook in a great house in Belgravia, with a French name and a reputation, might have 3 or 4 times it and a man under her. A plain cook in a household with 1 servant and no pretensions might have 18. You are in the upper middle of your trade, in a professional household that entertains regularly and cannot afford to entertain badly, and the whole arrangement rests on the fact that you know exactly how much you are worth, and so do they. 2 people work under you. The kitchen maid is 19 and has been here 14 months. She is quick. She has good hands. She cannot yet be trusted with a sauce at the moment when it decides whether to hold or break, and she will be a cook herself in 6 or 7 years if she keeps her nerve. The scullery maid is 15. She has been here 5 months. She washes, scours, scrubs, carries coal, cleans vegetables, blackleads the range, brushes the flues, and sleeps in the small room off the passage, and the great fact of her life is water. Hot water she has carried, cold water she has pumped, dirty water she has emptied. She is at the range now, with yesterday's cinders in a shovel, and you are going to watch how she lays the fire, because everything that happens today happens on top of that fire. You are one of 6 servants. There is the butler, who has been here longer than you, and who is the only other person below stairs with authority that does not come through you. There is the housemaid, and there is the parlour maid, who waits at table and answers the front door, and there is your kitchen maid, and there is the scullery maid. 6. That is a comfortable, well-managed, unshowy establishment for a professional family in this part of London. And if there were 7, the 7th would be a footman, and there is a conversation about a footman that has been going on upstairs for 2 years and has not yet concluded. Above stairs there are 6 people too, though they are counted differently. The master of the house is a barrister. He has chambers off Chancery Lane. He leaves at 9:30 and returns at a variable hour that is one of your standing problems, and he is a man of some standing without being a man of fashion. His wife is 34 and runs this house, which is to say, she runs you, or rather, she and you run it together in a partnership neither of you would ever describe in those words. There are 3 children, a boy of 11 who is away at school in term time, and 2 girls of 9 and 6 who are in the schoolroom on the 2nd floor. And there is the governess, who is 26, who eats some of her meals with the children and some alone, and whose position in this household is the most delicate thing in it. We will come back to her, because her tray tells you more about English class arrangements than any book of etiquette ever printed. That is the house. 4 floors, a basement, 12 people, 1 range. Now the day. Tonight at 8 o'clock, in the dining room on the first floor, up 2 flights of stairs from where you are standing, 14 people will sit down to dinner. It is not a grand dinner by the standards of the age. It is a serious one. There will be 9 courses, in the sense that 9 separate things will be sent up in sequence: soup, fish, 2 entrees, a joint, a game course, a sweet, an iced pudding, and the cheese and dessert that end it. Everything on that list has to leave this room hot or cold, as it should be, in the right order, at intervals decided upon by a man in the dining room whose signals you cannot see. You have 14 names on a sheet of paper propped against the dresser, and you have known most of them for a fortnight, because a dinner like this is arranged 3 weeks in advance, and the acceptances come in slowly. 12 are certain, 2 are not. There is a couple, connected to the household through the master's work, who have neither accepted nor declined. And the mistress said yesterday, in the tone of someone reporting weather, that she expected they would come. Which means you must cook for 16 and be prepared to send up for 14, and the difference between those 2 numbers is not 2 portions, it is a whole set of small recalculations that run down through every dish on the list and out through the back door to the tradesman. And there is the fish. You ordered a turbot. A turbot is what you serve when you want the fish course to say something without shouting, and the man who supplies this house has disappointed you twice, not with anything you could take to the mistress. Nothing spoiled, nothing dishonest. Simply a fish, a little smaller than the one you asked for, arriving at 9:15, when there is no time left in the world to do anything about it, with a boy at the door who has been told what to say. He is coming this morning. You have already decided roughly what you will do if it happens again, and you have decided it in the way you decide most things, which is not as a plan, but as 3 alternatives with prices attached. So that is the shape of it. 14 guests who may be 16. 9 courses. A fish you do not trust. A range that is currently stone cold. A kitchen maid who is not yet ready for the hard sauce, and a scullery maid who is 15 and will carry, by the end of tonight, something in the region of 30 gallons of water up and down a stone passage. 18 hours from where you are standing, this room will be quiet again, the copper cooling on its shelves, and you will sit at that table with a candle and a pencil and write down what you learned about the people upstairs. But it is not 6 o'clock yet, and before anything else can happen, somebody has to light the fire. Let the fire wait 1 moment longer. There is something about this room that will not make sense unless it is said plainly at the start, and it is easier to say now, while the kitchen is cold and nothing is happening in it. Tonight, at 8 o'clock, 16 people will sit down in a room on the first floor of this house. At 8:15, soup will be in front of them. Over the next 3 hours, dishes will arrive in an order they will not have to think about, at temperatures they will not have to remark on, in quantities that will never once run short and never once look wasteful. Not one person at that table will mention the kitchen. Not one of them will say the word cook. If the evening goes well, the food will be discussed in the way weather is discussed, as a condition of the room rather than the product of anybody's hands, and the hostess will be complimented on it in the hall as her guests take their cloaks. That is the fiction, and the fiction is the point. A dinner in a house like this is supposed to appear. It is supposed to arrive out of the floor, fully formed, 9 courses of it, as though the house simply produced meals the way it produces warmth and light. Everyone at the table understands perfectly well that there is a basement, they have basements of their own, but the whole social machinery of the evening depends on nobody looking down, and the deeper the fiction goes, the more expensive it is to maintain. Here is what it actually costs to make food appear from nowhere. 9 courses, once you count each dish separately, is somewhere between 20 and 30 distinct preparations, most of them requiring something that was begun hours or days earlier. 3 of tonight's dishes depend on a stock that has to be started before 10 this morning and skimmed all afternoon. 2 of them depend on ice bought by the block and kept from melting in a cellar in June. 1 of them, the iced pudding, will exist in a servable condition for perhaps 10 minutes, and those 10 minutes have to fall inside the correct 10 minutes of the evening, which is a thing you will be guessing at from a room 2 floors below, with no view of the table and no clock that matters except the bells. Between 6 this morning and midnight, 4 women in this basement will produce 2 family breakfasts, a servant's breakfast, a luncheon, a nursery dinner, a servant's dinner, tea, and then the whole of tonight, and the last of it will be washed and put away by hands that started at 5:45. And none of that is the difficult part. The difficult part is the people. Anyone who has served a proper apprenticeship can cook a 9-course dinner. What separates a cook worth £35 a year from a cook worth 18 is not her sauces. It is that she knows who she is cooking for, not the hostess, the 16, and she knows it in a way the hostess does not, because the hostess sees these people upright, dressed, gloved and behaving, and you see what they leave on the plate. There is a book for it. It lives on the dresser shelf between the salt jar and the copy of the household manual you have owned for 11 years, and it is not the account book. The account book belongs to the mistress, is written in ink, is added up on the last day of the month, and shows how much was spent on butter. This is the other book. You bought it for 1 6 in a stationer's on a Thursday afternoon 4 years ago, in your first month here, and you keep it in pencil. Pencil, because ink runs when hands are wet, and your hands are wet most of the day. The book is arranged by household rather than by person, because that is how information actually arrives. The pages are headed the way you think of people: the tall house on the square, the Bedford Place people, the barrister's brother, the family that came at Christmas with the 2 daughters. Underneath, the entries are short. There is no prose in this book. There is no need for any. Shellfish, untouched, twice. Took soup only. Asked for the plain jelly, twice, and did not take the ice. Cannot manage cucumber. Refused mutton. Praised mutton. Nothing after the fish, both occasions, and looked well enough. Sauce left on the plate, fish eaten clean. 2 helpings of the potatoes and 1 of everything else. 4 years of that is a document of considerable power, and it tells you 6 or 7 separate kinds of thing about a person, all of them useful. It tells you what their constitution will bear. There are guests in this house who cannot take a rich sauce, and who will never once say so, because a gentleman of 45 does not announce his digestion in company. He simply eats around it. You will see the sauce, pushed to the rim of the plate, with the fish gone from underneath it, and you will know, and next time there will be a plainer dish, somewhere in the course, that happens to be within his reach, and he will take that instead, and he will go home thinking well of the evening, without ever knowing why. It tells you their temper. Some people eat like people who expect to be pleased. Others eat like people looking for the fault, and you can see it in the way a plate comes back, half the dish sampled and abandoned, the way a man tastes wine he intends to send away. One of tonight's guests keeps a French cook at twice your wages and will measure everything on the table against her, and you have known that since the March before last, from a single returned plate and one remark carried down by a footman. It tells you their thrift, which is a delicate matter. There are households in this street that dine out 4 nights in 5 and entertain twice a year, and there are households that do the opposite, and a cook learns to read the difference from the way their servants talk about their own table. It is not gossip for its own sake. It is how you gauge what a guest will consider generous and what a guest will consider showing off, and the second is a worse error than the first. It tells you their observances. There is a household on the list that keeps fish on a Friday and will expect it and will notice if there is none, and that is a plain fact of the menu, no different from an allergy or a preference. There is a lady coming tonight in half mourning, and half mourning wants plainness, or at least the appearance of it, and to put a very elaborate dish in front of her is a small unkindness that costs nothing to avoid. There is a gentleman who takes no wine at all, on principle, and who does not care to be looked at while not taking it, which means his glass wants filling with something the color of wine, and that is arranged with the butler and not discussed, and it tells you the gap. This is the part that interests you most, and it is the part no manual mentions. What a person says at a table and what a person eats at a table are frequently 2 different accounts. There are men who talk about plain English food, honest joints, no French nonsense, and who then take a second helping of the most highly finished dish on the table. There are ladies who say they eat almost nothing, and mean it sincerely, and clear a plate. There is nothing dishonest in any of it. It is simply that people describe the diner they believe themselves to be, and then their hands do something else, and the plate comes downstairs to you as the only honest witness in the house. None of this reaches you by magic. There is a system, and the system is the servant's side of the house, which carries information the way the water pipes carry water, quietly and constantly and to every floor. The footmen are the first source, because they clear. A footman going round the table with a tray sees which plates are finished, which are picked at, which are pushed away with the fork laid across for the sake of appearances, and a good footman will tell you, partly because it is his own credit too, and partly because a man who has been kind to the cook eats better. The footmen are also the least reliable. They embroider. They will tell you a dish was praised when what was said was that it was very pretty, and you learn to divide their reports roughly by half. Visiting servants are the second source, and much better. A lady who dines out may bring her maid. A gentleman's coachman waits somewhere, and where he waits is your kitchen, and what he gets while he waits is bread and cheese and cold beef and a chair by the fire, and that is not charity, it is trade. An hour of a coachman's conversation while his master is at table upstairs will tell you what that master eats at home, what he sends back, what he has been told to avoid, and whether he pays his own tradesmen on time. Maids are the most accurate of all on small things, because small things are their work. Then there are the tradesmen, who serve 6 or 8 houses on this street, and stand at every area door in turn. The butcher's boy knows which household has cut its weekly order and which has increased it. He is entirely accurate about money and almost entirely wrong about everything else, and you use him accordingly. Above all of them sits the butler, who knows the most and says the least, and whose information you receive only when he judges it useful to give. That, too, you have learned to work with. The rule you have made for yourself out of all this, and it has never once failed you, is to believe plates before people. Anything a person says about their own eating is an opinion. What comes back down the stairs is evidence. Which brings you to the piece of paper propped against the salt jar on the dresser, in the mistress's handwriting, listing 14 names with 2 more expected. You have read it 4 times since yesterday evening. You do not read it as a list of names, because names are not what you cook for. You read it as columns. Plainness on this side, richness on that. One who takes no wine, one who takes no shellfish, 2 you have never fed and know nothing about, and 1 who will be counting your faults from the moment the soup arrives. 16 people, and you already know what most of them will eat before they know it themselves. Now the fire. The scullery maid has been at it since 20 minutes past 5, and she does not know you are watching her, because you are standing in the doorway of the larder passage with your hands folded, and you have made no sound. This is deliberate. You want to see the fire laid as she lays it when nobody is looking, not as she lays it when the cook is at her shoulder. She works from a wooden box on the flags beside her. Yesterday's cinders first, riddled through the ash sieve last night, so that the fine ash went into the bin and the half-burned coke came back to be used again. Then the paper, twisted into long spills rather than crumpled into balls, which is correct, and which she learned from you. Then the wood, laid crosswise with air between the pieces. Then the cinders again, in a thin layer, and the fresh coal on top of that, small pieces at the front and larger behind, and not 1 lump more than the firebox needs. You watch her fingers, which are black to the 2nd knuckle, and will be black to the wrist by 7 o'clock. She is 15. She sleeps in the room off the scullery, where the walls sweat in wet weather, and she rises before anyone else in the house, because everything anyone else does today depends on what she is doing now. A badly laid fire will cost you the entire day. Not an hour, not a temper, the day. If she packs the coal too tight, the air cannot move through it, and you will have a smouldering, sulky, smoking bed of fuel that will not bring a large stockpot to the boil before 9. If she lays it too loose, it will burn fierce and fast, and hollow itself out, and you will be feeding it every 15 minutes while trying to hold 3 saucers, and the oven will swing 30 degrees in either direction while your pastry is in it. Either way, the dinner for 16 is compromised at 5:30 in the morning by a girl of 15 with a box of cinders, and nobody upstairs will ever know that this is how such things are decided. She strikes the match. The paper takes, the wood catches with that dry cracking that is the best sound in the kitchen, and she sets the dampers where you have taught her to set them for a cold start. You wait until the coal has caught properly before you speak, and then you only say that it is well done, because it is, and because a girl who is told when she has done it right will keep doing it right. This is worth slowing down for, because the thing she has just lit is not a fireplace. It is a machine, and it is the most complicated piece of equipment in the house. The old open range that your mother cooked on was a fire in a recess, with a bar in front of it, and a spit or a hook, and a swinging trivet, and you cooked by putting things nearer to the flame or further from it. Everything else was guesswork and forearms. What you have here is a closed range, iron from wall to wall, the fire shut into a box behind bars, with a plate over the top of it, so that the whole upper surface is a cooking surface. On the right of the firebox, there is the oven, a heavy iron chamber with a door that drops rather than swings. On the left there is the boiler, a tank of water with a brass tap at the bottom of it, which the fire heats as a side effect of heating everything else, so that hot water is always coming out of the same coal that cooks the joint. Behind and around all of it run the flues, which are the actual intelligence of the design. The hot gases from the fire do not simply go up the chimney. They are led sideways under the hot plate, then around the oven, then out, and there are iron dampers with handles on the front, which you slide to decide where the heat goes. Open one, and the oven takes the heat. Close it and shift another, and the heat goes to the boiler and the hot plate instead. Shut them down at night, and the fire will hold, half asleep, until morning. You govern all of it by 4 handles, a poker, and your own judgment, because there is not a thermometer anywhere in this kitchen, and would not be in one kitchen in 100. When you need to know the temperature of that oven, you open the door, put your bare forearm inside for a count, and read the heat on your skin. When you need to be more careful than that, you throw in a pinch of flour and watch how fast it colors, or you lay a piece of writing paper on the shelf and time how long it takes to brown, or you hold your palm at the mouth and count how many seconds you can bear it. Slack, moderate, brisk, quick. Those are your settings, and they live in your arm rather than on a dial. 22 years of standing at ranges is what makes them mean anything. Now the coal, because the coal is money, and you are held responsible for it. It comes into the house through a round iron plate in the pavement above your head, out on the street side of the area railings, which lifts up to reveal a hole dropping into the coal cellar below the front steps. The merchant's men carry the sacks along the pavement on their shoulders, upend them into the hole, and the coal goes down into the dark in a rush that you hear as a long roar through the wall and feel in the flags under your feet. Each sack is 100 weight. 20 of them make a ton. You go out and count them as they are tipped, every single delivery, standing in the area in your apron with your arms crossed, because a house that does not count its sacks does not receive 20 of them. Good household coal in London costs somewhere in the neighborhood of £1 a ton, and rather more than that in a hard winter when the river traffic is slow and every kitchen in the city wants it at once. There are grades, and the grades matter to you more than they matter to anyone upstairs. The large, bright, best coal is for the drawing room grate, where it must look handsome and burn without smell for a lady sitting near it. What you want for the range is smaller stuff, kitchen nuts and cobbles, which burns hotter and steadier in a closed firebox and does not need to be pretty, because nobody will ever see it. Half the arguments you have with the coal merchant are about being sent the wrong grade at the right price. A house like this one, with the range going from before 6 in the morning until near midnight, with the boiler wanted for hot water, with grates upstairs in the dining room and drawing room and the mistress's bedroom and a fire in the nursery all winter, will get through something between 10 and 15 tons in a year. The kitchen fire alone will account for the largest single share of it, better than half 100 weight on an ordinary day, and a good deal more than that on a day like today. Put a figure on the whole household's fuel, and you are looking at £15 in a year, perhaps 20 in a bad one. Sit with that against your own wage of £35. The coal that comes down that hole costs this family something not far off half of what the woman who commands it is paid, and rather more than they pay the kitchen maid and the scullery maid together for a year of their lives. It is one of the reasons a cook who wastes fuel does not stay long. Economy in the kitchen is measured in coal before it is measured in anything else, because coal is the one expense the mistress can see going into the house in sacks and hear going down into the cellar, and the machine that burns it demands to be tended like an invalid. Every morning, before the fire is lit, the ash has to come out of the bottom, and the ash goes everywhere. Every morning, the whole front of the range has to be black-leaded, which means a paste of graphite and water worked into the iron with one brush and then polished off with another until the surface has a dull grey shine on it. Every morning the steel parts, the trivets and the fender and the fire irons have to be rubbed with emery paper and oil to keep the rust off them, because iron and steel in a basement kitchen in a damp city will rust in a week left alone. That is an hour of the scullery maid's morning, on her knees, every day, before the real work of the day starts, and it will be an hour of her morning every day for the years she is here. Then there are the flues. Soot builds in those clever sideways passages around the oven, and as it builds, the heat stops traveling where the dampers send it, and an oven that was brisk last month becomes an oven that will not brown anything. So once a week, the flue doors come off and the long brush goes in, and the soot comes out in soft black drifts, and for the rest of that day, the taste of it is in the back of your throat. Twice a year, the sweep comes to the chimney itself. The range is taken down and looked over by the ironmonger's man when it needs it, and the copper hot water pipes are looked at by somebody else, and none of that is your money, but all of it is your fault if it is neglected. Which is why authority in this house begins here, at the iron, and not with the menu, or the larder key, or the writing of French words on a card. The mistress can order a dinner. She cannot make an oven hold a moderate heat for 50 minutes. The butler can send a course up at exactly the right moment, and does, and is very good at it. He could not raise a clear stock to the correct simmer if his position depended on it. The one person in this house who can look at a bed of coal and say what it will be doing in half an hour is you, and everything else you are permitted to decide follows from that. You were 15 once, on those flags, with a box of cinders and black fingers, and the first thing you ever learned was that whoever controls the heat controls the kitchen, and whoever controls the kitchen has more power in a household of this kind than the household will ever admit out loud. The fire is up now. The maid has the great iron kettle on the hot plate and the smaller one behind it, and she has opened the boiler tap to let the cold run through and refill so that nothing sits in there stale. Water begins to move in the tank with a low knocking sound as it warms, and the smell of the room changes. That cold iron smell you came down to, which is the smell of a dead kitchen and always sits badly with you, is being pushed out by warm iron and coal smoke and the faint scorch of blacklead cooking off the range front. Underneath it, the first suggestion of coffee. Somewhere over your head, a bell wire shifts in the wall. The house is beginning to want things. By 7:30, there are 2 breakfasts in this kitchen and 1 fire to make them on, and the whole art of the next hour is keeping them from interfering with each other. The family's breakfast is not a meal in the sense that dinner is a meal. Nobody sits down together and waits. The dishes go up to the breakfast room and stand on the sideboard over hot water, and the household comes down as it pleases between 8 and 9:30, and each of them expects to find something hot that has not been standing long enough to know it. That is the trick of it. A dish that has been kept warm for 40 minutes is not the same dish, and the master, who comes down first and eats in about 11 minutes with a newspaper folded beside him, would notice, though he would not say so to you. He would say something to his wife, and his wife would say something to you. and it would arrive 3 days later, worded as a suggestion. So this morning, a dish of kidneys, split and grilled, done at the last minute because they harden if they wait. Bacon, cut thin, laid on a rack so the fat runs off it. A dish of eggs, poached, which the kitchen maid is doing now in the flat pan with a spoonful of vinegar in the water, and which she does well, and which she has only been trusted with since Easter. On the sideboard, cold, the end of the tongue from Tuesday, glazed to look like a decision rather than a remainder, and a small dish of potted meat that the children like, rolls warmed through, toast in 2 racks, butter, marmalade, honey in the comb, because the mistress's sister sent a jar of it. And in the second toast rack, kept separate and slightly apart, 4 slices of dry toast, thin, made in the same fire as everything else, and then let go entirely cold before it went up. That is the master's. He has been told by a physician in Harley Street to leave off butter and cream and the richer sauces, and he has taken about half of the advice, which is the usual proportion. He will not mention it at table. If a guest is present, he will take butter like anyone else and be uncomfortable afterwards. But at breakfast, alone with the newspaper and no audience to perform for, he eats dry toast and drinks his coffee black, and you make that toast dry without being asked, and it has never once been discussed between you in 4 years. You know a great deal about that man's constitution, and he does not know that you know it. This is not unusual. It is the ordinary condition of a house. The servants' breakfast is happening at the same time, on the same coal, at the long deal table 8 feet behind you. It is bread and butter, and a great deal of it. Tea from the big brown pot, which the housemaid makes because the kitchen maid makes it too weak. Porridge for whoever wants it. Cold bacon and dripping toast, and this morning the heel of yesterday's cold beef, sliced, because it will not keep another day in this weather, and because a hungry footman is a slow footman. Nobody sits idle over it. The housemaid has been up since 6 laying fires upstairs, and has soot under her nails. The footman has the boots and the knives still to finish. You eat standing at the dresser, with a cup of tea going cold beside you, and you will not properly sit down at all today, and you have long since stopped noticing that. Here is where it is worth slowing down, because the arrangement of that table is not casual, and it tells you the shape of the entire household. 6 of you are kept in this house. The butler, £60 a year. Yourself, 35. The footman, 28, though he is 19 years old and worth about half of it yet. The housemaid, £16. The kitchen maid, 14. The scullery maid, £10, and her tea and sugar, which she has never had before in her life and considers a fortune. Add the beer money, the tea and sugar allowances, the annual dress or its cash equivalent for the maids, and the wage bill for the servants of a house like this, comes to something not far off £200 a year before a single mouthful of food is bought. The barrister upstairs earns, you would guess, between £1,200 and £2,000, depending on the year and the work, and he does not know within £30 what his own kitchen costs him, because his wife keeps those books, and he has never asked to see them. Now the important part. In a great house, there would be a housekeeper above you, and a steward above her, and your place would be plain. In a house of this size, there is no housekeeper. There is the butler, and there is you. He is not your superior. This is the thing that people misunderstand about service. Imagining one long ladder running from the scullery to the drawing room, with everybody neatly on their rung. It does not work like that. The house has 2 systems, and they meet at the top, without one swallowing the other. The butler has the front of the house, the plate, the cellar, the wine, the door, the footman, and the whole performance of service upstairs. You have the kitchen, the larder, the still-room stores, the coal for your own range, the ordering of provisions, and the 2 maids below you. "He does not enter my larder" is a sentence you have never had to say aloud, because it has never been necessary. He cannot tell you what to cook. You cannot tell him how to lay a table. Where the 2 systems touch, at the exact moment a dish leaves the kitchen and becomes his to carry up, there is a permanent, quiet, extremely polite friction, and both of you manage it every single day without once naming it. At the deal table, it shows itself in seating. He takes the head, you take the foot, which is not the humbler end, but the other end, the end from which the food is served and from which you can see everyone. The footman sits at his master's right. The maids fill in below in order of their own standing, and the scullery maid sits nearest the door, where the draught is, and gets up when anything is wanted, because she is 14, and that is what 14 is for in this world. When there is pudding at dinner in the middle of the day, the lower servants eat theirs at the table, and then leave, and you and the butler take yours with a little more ceremony, and rather better tea, and nobody has ever written this rule down anywhere. It transmits itself. Every girl who comes into service learns the whole system within a fortnight from other girls, the way you learned it, from a cook in Islington who told you almost nothing kindly and everything correctly. There is one person in this house who has no place at either breakfast, and her tray is standing on the corner of the dresser now, waiting for the footman. The governess eats in the schoolroom with the 3 children, not in the dining room, because she is paid, not in the servants' hall, because she is a gentlewoman, or was one, or her father was a clergyman with no money, which comes to the same thing. She is called Miss, and the housemaid calls her Miss, and you call her Miss, and she earns, you happen to know, £40 a year, which is £5 more than you, and about a third of what a competent cook can command in a house that wants a reputation for its table. She has no beer money. She has no perquisites at all. She cannot be given notice by the butler, and she cannot give notice to anybody below her, because there is nobody below her. She is entirely alone in a house of 11 people. You can read her position off that tray with total accuracy, and you assemble it every morning, knowing exactly what you are saying with it. She gets the same coffee as upstairs, because to send her worse coffee would be an insult so clear that the mistress would have to notice it. She gets it in the second best pot, the plain white one with the mended handle, because to send the good silver up 3 flights to a schoolroom is not done. She gets toast from the same rack as the family and butter from the same crock. She gets 1 hot dish, milk and bread and boiled eggs for the children and a little of the bacon for herself, and she does not get the kidneys, because kidneys are for the sideboard and there are exactly enough. If she wants more hot water, she must ring, and if she rings twice in a morning, the housemaid will mention it, not unkindly, but she will mention it, and the governess knows this, and so she does not ring twice. 4 years, and she has never once sent anything back down to this kitchen with a complaint attached. Not one. Whether that is manners or caution, or simply having nowhere else to go, you have never decided. The footman takes the tray up. The bell wire in the wall shifts twice, which is the breakfast room, and he goes at once. And then, from about 8:15, it begins to come back. This is the part of breakfast you actually attend to. The plates return in an untidy stack, carried down or sent down, and the kitchen maid takes them straight through to the scullery, and in the 4 or 5 seconds it takes them to cross the room in front of you, you read them. You do not decide to do this. You have not decided to do it for 20 years. The kidney dish, cleared entirely, and one of the children has been at it, because there is a smear of it on the small plate, with the crust cut off. The eggs, 2 gone, 2 sitting in cooling water, so the mistress did not come down, so she had her tea and a slice of bread and butter in her room again, which is the 4th morning this week, and means she is thinking hard about tonight. The dry toast, 3 slices of 4, and the coffee cup drained to the grounds. The marmalade jar wants filling before tomorrow. The tongue has been shaved at from the wrong side by somebody in a hurry, and it will need trimming and glazing again before it can be shown to anybody. And on the schoolroom tray coming down last, everything eaten, everything stacked neatly by somebody who was never taught to stack plates by a servant, and does it anyway, out of an instinct not to give trouble. You dry your hands. It is 20 minutes to 9, and the area bell is about to start. The area door is the real front door of this house, and everyone who does business here knows it. It sits under the pavement, at the bottom of 8 stone steps that drop from the street behind the iron railings, in a well about 6 feet square, with a grating in the corner and a scraper by the sill. From the kitchen window, you see people from the knee down. You know half the tradesmen of this district by their boots and their trouser hems, and you know them in the order they come. The bell in the passage is a different bell from the ones upstairs, lower and flatter, and it has been rung so often that the wire sags. It goes at 20 minutes to 9. The milk is first, because the milk is always first. 2 cans, 1 for the servants' hall and 1 for upstairs, poured into your own jugs at the door, because you will not have the cans in the house. You look at the surface of it as it goes in. Cream sitting properly, no blue cast to it, no smell, but milk. He is a reliable man from a dairy off the Gray's Inn Road. And the reason he is reliable is that 4 years ago, you sent a can back up those steps and told him why, in front of the scullery maid, and he has never given you cause since. Then the greengrocer's boy, with a basket he can barely carry up the steps in one go, 2 dozen forced asparagus, which is the extravagance of this whole day, and which you ordered on Tuesday, knowing exactly what it would cost. Cucumbers, watercress, a netting bag of new potatoes, small as marbles, spinach, and a great deal of it, because spinach cooks down to almost nothing, and every kitchen maid in London learns that lesson once. Salad stuff, lemons, a pineapple in a wooden crate with straw round it that will sit in the larder untouched until 9:30 tonight, and then be sliced and built into something and eaten in about 4 minutes by 16 people who will not think about it again. You take the pineapple out and turn it over in your hands at the door. The base of the fruit is where it goes first. This one is sound. The butcher's boy comes at 10 minutes to 9, and he comes on a handcart because of the weight. The saddle of mutton is what you look at first, because that is the joint the whole middle of the dinner rests on, and you look at the fat, which should be firm and dry and white rather than yellow, and at the way the meat has been hung, which you can read from the color of it near the bone. This is a good saddle. You say so, once because a butcher who is told when he has done well can be told when he has not. There is a small basket besides with the sweetbreads in it, and the chickens for the entrees, and a piece of veal for the stock, and the bones you asked for and did not order, because bones are not ordered, bones are given, and the giving of them is part of an arrangement that has taken you 4 years to build. The boy holds out the book. Every house on this street has one. It is a narrow-ruled notebook, and in it, in his employer's hand, is the day's delivery written out item by item with the weights, and you go down it in the doorway with your thumb and check the weights against the meat in front of you, and then you initial it. That book will be added up at the end of the month, and a bill will come to the house on it, and the mistress will look at the total and not at the lines. This is worth slowing down for, because the tradesman's book is the whole financial architecture of a house like this, and almost nobody upstairs understands how it works. Nothing in this kitchen is paid for with money at the point of sale. There is no purse at the area door. Everything comes on credit, entered in a book, and settled monthly or quarterly by the master, or, more usually, by the mistress out of the housekeeping allowance he gives her. The butcher, the fishmonger, the baker, the grocer, the dairy, the coal merchant, the oilman, the ice merchant, the poulterer, each keeps a running account for this address, and the size of those accounts is not small. A household of this kind, 4 in the family, 6 in service, entertaining as often as this one does, will spend somewhere near £250 in a year on food and fuel alone, and the greater part of it passes through your hands before it passes through anybody's mouth. Set that beside what you are paid. £35 a year, quarterly, with your board and your bed and your beer money. You order and receive and account for something in the region of 7 times your own wage every 12 months, and you do it in pencil, in a book, at a door below the level of the street. Which is why the tradesmen are so extremely pleasant to you. Consider the prices for a moment, because they explain the courtesy. Beef, at the middling cuts, runs at about 9p or 10p the pound this year, and the better joints up to £1. Butter is £1 and 2p to £1 and 4p, and you use it here by the pound and not by the ounce. Cream is bought by the pint, and the pint is dear. Eggs come at 10 or 12 for £1 in the spring and cost you more in the winter. And turbot, in season, at a fishmonger with a decent counter and a reputation to keep, will stand you at 2 the pound, and sometimes better than that, which is why a turbot of 8 or 9 pounds weight is a sum of money lying on a board with parsley round it, and why the fish for a dinner of 16 can cost more than a housemaid earns in a month. You are the person who decides which fishmonger gets that order, not the mistress. She decides that there will be fish. You decide from whom, and how much, and whether he keeps the custom of this house next year, and every man who comes down those 8 steps knows it. Now, the arrangements that grow out of that fact are where a cook's reputation is either made or quietly lost, and it is worth being honest about them. There is a class of thing called the perquisites, and they are not theft, and everybody understands them, and their edges are vague. The dripping is yours, the fat that comes off every joint, clarified and potted, belongs by long custom to the cook, and there are dealers who will call at the area door once a week and buy it by the pot. The bones, after the stock pot has had what it wants, go the same way. So do the rabbit skins, when there are rabbits. So does what is generally called the kitchen stuff, which is a phrase covering a great many small salvages, and which in a busy house can be worth £1 or 2 a quarter to the woman who manages it, on top of her wage. That much is open. Beyond it, there is the other kind of arrangement, and every cook in London has been offered it. A tradesman, anxious to keep an account of £200 a year, will sometimes offer the cook a consideration on it. A penny in the shilling, quietly, or a sovereign at Christmas, or the promise that a joint for the servants' hall will not appear in the book at all. It is not spoken of directly. It is spoken of as though it were gratitude. Where you draw the line is a professional decision rather than only a moral one, and you drew yours years ago in a house in Marylebone, where the cook took the penny and the shilling, and the master, who was better at arithmetic than most, sat down one evening with 3 years of butcher's books and found it. She left inside a week, and she left without a written character, and a cook without a written character at 40 is a woman looking for work in a coffee shop. Nothing she had ever known about food mattered at all after that afternoon. So you take the dripping and the bones and the pot at Christmas that everybody takes, and you take nothing on the account, and the tradesmen know that about you too, which is worth more to you than the money would have been. It means the good turbot comes here first, except that this morning it has not. The fishmonger's cart pulls up above at 5 minutes to 9, and he comes down the steps himself, which tells you what is coming before he has opened his mouth. He has the box on his shoulder, and he sets it on the flags and takes the lid off, and there is the turbot on the crushed ice, and it is a beautiful fish, firm and thick, with a good clear eye, and the skin unbroken, and it is not the fish you ordered. You asked for £9, this is 6, or a shade over. He begins to explain about the boats and the tide and Billingsgate at 4 in the morning, and you let him get about 2 sentences into it while you do the arithmetic, because the arithmetic is what matters, and you have perhaps 90 seconds before he starts offering you something worse. 6 pounds of turbot will serve 16 people if it is cut and dressed as portions and not sent up whole, with a sauce and a slice for each. Sent up whole, it will look mean, and this is a table with people at it who will be counting. Cut and dressed, with a good rich sauce and a garnish, it will look considered rather than short, and nobody counts a dish they cannot see the shape of, but it leaves a gap in the fish course where the second dish should be, and a gap in that particular course with those particular guests is not a thing you can leave. So you do not send the fish back, because there is no other turbot in London that will reach this door in time, and you both know it. You accept it, and you accept it at the weight it is, and you say the word slate, which means the difference goes off the bill, and he agrees to that instantly, because he expected to be told worse. And then you name your condition, 2 pairs of Dover soles, prime, filleted or whole as you please, delivered to this door by 2 o'clock this afternoon, and not entered in the book at all. He looks at the flagstones for a moment, and then says 2 o'clock, and goes back up the steps. You have the lid back on the box before he is at the top of them. The fish course is now a dressed turbot, with a lobster sauce and a dish of soles in a wine sauce beside it, which is a better course than the one you had planned this morning, and you have thought of it, adjusted for it, priced it, and secured it standing in a doorway in the cold with wet hands. It is 4 minutes past 9. You have not yet been upstairs once today. At 9:45 you stop, which is the only deliberate stop you will make before dinner, and you make yourself fit to be seen upstairs. That means the sacking apron off and a clean white one on. It means the cap straightened at the glass by the dresser, which is a small square of mirror hung there for exactly this purpose and used for nothing else. And it means your hands, which have been in a fish box, scrubbed at the scullery sink with the brush, and then rubbed with a cut lemon and rinsed again in cold water, because the smell of fish will follow you up 2 flights and into a carpeted room, and it will be remembered longer than anything you say. The kitchen maid watches you do this. She has learned by now that the interview is not a small thing, that a cook who goes up looking like a cook has already lost some part of the argument before she opens her mouth. Under your arm, you carry the menu book. It is a plain bound volume, ruled, with a date at the head of each page and the day's dinner written out beneath in your own hand, and a column at the side for the mistress's remarks, which are usually nothing and occasionally a single word. That book is the household's official record of what it has eaten. It also stops you serving the same dinner twice to the same people, which is a real danger in a house that entertains, and which is remembered by guests with a precision they never apply to anything kind. The other book, the pencil one, stays in the dresser drawer where it lives. You go up the back stairs. They are stone as far as the ground floor, and then wood, uncarpeted, narrow, lit by nothing, and at the top of them is the door covered in green baize that separates the working house from the house that is looked at. Going through that door is a change of climate. The air stops smelling of coal and stock, and starts smelling of beeswax and coffee, and, faintly, of the flowers standing in the hall. The floor gives under your feet. Sound goes soft. Somewhere above you the governess is taking the children through a French lesson, and you can hear the rhythm of it without the words, a question, and a small voice answering. The morning room faces the garden at the back and gets whatever light there is. Your mistress is at a small writing desk with the morning's letters in front of her, 2 of them opened, 1 not. The fire has been lit since 7 o'clock by the housemaid, and there is a cup at her elbow. You come in when she says come in, and you stand. You are not asked to sit, and you would not sit. The interview lasts 11 minutes on an ordinary day, and 20 on a day like this one. And for all of it, you stand with the book open on your forearm, reading from it upside down to yourself, while she reads it the right way up. She has been thinking, which is always the difficulty. What she has been thinking about is a dinner she went to in Cavendish Square in the spring, where there was a hot soufflé sent up at the end, very high, very light, and she would like one of those tonight. She says it pleasantly. She has no notion at all that she has just asked for something that cannot be done, and there is no version of this conversation in which you tell her so in those words. So you say that it is a beautiful thing, a soufflé, and that the difficulty is the stairs. You say it slowly and with respect for her idea. A soufflé lives about 4 minutes. The kitchen is in the basement, and the dining room is on the first floor, which is 2 flights and a passage, and a footman with a dish in his hands cannot run. What arrives at the table will be a sunken thing with a wet center, and it will arrive in front of 16 people, several of whom keep a French cook of their own. In the house in Cavendish Square, you happen to know, there is a lift. Then, before the silence can settle into disappointment, you give her 2 things to choose between. There is the iced pudding, already ordered, already turning in the pail, which will go up hard and stand up to being looked at. Or there is a hot pudding of the kind that travels, a rich one, sent up with a hot sauce round it, which is not as fashionable, but is very good and very handsome. And you say, in the ordinary way of saying it, that the iced pudding would sit better after game, and that you had thought the soles might carry the fish course further than usual tonight. The soles are the first she has heard of any soles. She is pleased by them. They cost her nothing, and she will never know how they came to be on the list. And she says yes to the ice, and the soufflé has been buried so gently that she does not notice it has gone into the ground. That is the whole grammar of the thing. You never refuse. You explain a difficulty. You assign the difficulty to an object rather than to her judgment, and you offer 2 courses of action, one of which is the one you intend to take. In 4 years you have never once said no in that room, and there has been no dinner in 4 years that you did not design. The menu itself goes up in French, not the book, which is in English and is a working document, but the card that stands on the table for the guests to read. This is not affectation, or not only. By the 1880s, a written dinner card in French is simply the standard form for a household of this kind, and the reason is that the professional language of the kitchen is French, and has been since the great chefs of the last 2 generations wrote in it and published in it. Charles Elme Francatelli, who had trained under Carême and cooked for a queen, put out a book called The Modern Cook that sat on English kitchen shelves for decades and named everything the way Paris named it. Eliza Acton, who wrote the best English cookery book of the century nearly 40 years before this morning, gave her receipts in plain English and yet still expected her reader to know a dozen French terms as terms of trade. Mrs. Beeton's household book, which is in the morning room downstairs and not in your kitchen, does the same. So a cook who can write out a card correctly, who knows which dish is a puree and which a bisque, which garnish carries which name, where the accents fall and where they do not, is a cook who can be advertised. Kitchen French is a credential. It is worth pounds a year, actual pounds, and cooks who have it get the places with dinners in them, and cooks who do not get the places with a family of 5 and no company. You learned yours the way most of them did, under a cook in your second place, who kept every dinner card she had ever been given in a tin and let you copy them out in the evenings. You spelled a good deal of it as it sounded for the first 2 years, and were corrected without mercy. You cannot hold a conversation in French, and you never will, and the governess, 2 floors above you, could correct your accent on every word, but you can write out a 9-course dinner in it, in a fair hand, in 8 minutes, and that is the part of it anyone has ever needed from you. The card matters more now than it would have when you were a girl, and the reason for that is the way dinner itself has changed. Your grandmother's employers ate what the manuals call service à la française, the French manner, and it meant that the food went on the table, all of it, or all of 1 course of it, set out at once, in a symmetrical arrangement, soups at the ends, dishes ranged between, and the gentlemen carved the joints where they sat, and helped the ladies beside them from whatever stood within reach. It was a spectacle. It was also, from the kitchen's point of view, forgiving. A great deal went up at once, and stood on the table for half an hour, and if a sauce was 10 minutes late, nobody in the room could have told you. What the century has replaced it with is what the same manuals call service à la Russe, the Russian service, and it is what will happen in the dining room above you tonight. Nothing is carved at the table. The joints are carved at the sideboard by the butler and handed round by footmen, dish by dish, guest by guest, and the courses arrive in a strict procession, and between them the table holds flowers and glass and the card, and nothing else. That change moved the whole burden onto you. Under the Russian service, the number of courses goes up, because each one now has to be a separate event. The dishes get smaller and more numerous, and every one of them must be finished, identical, 16 times over, because every guest sees the dish come to their own elbow at close range with a light on it. Garnish stops being decoration on a distant centerpiece and becomes something a man can examine 3 inches from his plate. Timing stops being approximate and becomes absolute, because there is now nothing on that table to occupy anybody while the kitchen catches up. and the arithmetic of vessels doubles, and then doubles again, and the scullery fills. The old way asked a cook to build one magnificent still life. The new way asks her to run 9 consecutive performances to a clock she cannot see, from a room 2 floors below the audience. Nobody upstairs thinks of it in those terms. Your mistress thinks of it as the correct modern way to give a dinner, which it is. She has one more thing for you, and she has left it until the end, which is how you know she knows it is not welcome. The 2 doubtful names have written to accept, a colleague of your master's from Chambers and his wife, who have been asked for a fortnight and have only now made up their minds. That makes 16. You say, "Very good, ma'am," and you write it in the book in front of her, and there is nothing whatever in your face while you do it, and inside your head, the whole day is being recalculated at speed. 16 means 2 more of everything portioned. It means the soup quantity is now short by rather more than 2 servings, because 16 people take more soup than 14 people do. It means the ice must be turned longer and the mold filled fuller. It means 2 more of the little forced things in the second course, which are made one at a time by hand. And it means the 2 pairs of soles you extracted from a fishmonger at 9 o'clock this morning, for nothing, in a cold doorway, have just become the reason the fish course will feed 16 people without looking stretched. You close the book. You go out and down the passage and through the green door into the smell of coal and stock, and the number goes down the stone stairs with you, like something carried in both arms. The list lies flat on the scrubbed table with a copper weight at one corner to keep it from lifting in the draught from the area door. 16 names in your mistress's looping hand, and beneath them, in your own pencil, the additions and the crossings out of the last 3 days. You have wiped the table down and dried it before setting the paper there, because a smear of dripping across a guest list is the kind of thing that gets talked about. You read the names, but you do not think in names. Almost nobody below stairs does. You think in houses and in dishes, which is a more reliable filing system, and it is the one your kitchen book uses. The second name on the list is not a barrister with a knighthood coming to him within 5 years. He is Bedford Place, cutlets, sent back the sauce. The 4th name is not a lady with a house in the country and a great many opinions about servants. She is Torrington Square, the one who takes soup twice and nothing after the fish. You have never spoken a word to either of them, and you would not know them on the pavement, and you know what each of them will do with a plate. The book comes out of the dresser drawer and opens against a jug to keep the pages down. 12 years of it now, carried from your last place and the place before. The early pages in a rounder hand than you write in now. A page to a household, more or less, though some of the busier ones run to 3, dates down the left, what went up, what came back, and what it meant. You start at the top and you work down, and you make your decisions as you go. The gentleman coming from Doughty Street cannot take rich sauces. He has never said so, not to your mistress, not to anyone at any table in this parish, and he will eat a spoonful of anything put in front of him rather than admit to a delicacy of constitution in company. But his plates have come back to you 4 times over 3 years, with the meat eaten and the sauce pushed carefully to the rim, in a neat crescent, the way a man does it when he wants it to look like carelessness. His own cook, you happen to know, serves him boiled fowl and a white sauce with no more than butter and flour and a little cream in it, twice a week. So there will be a plain roast in the 3rd course, as well as the braised thing, and the plain roast will go to his side of the table first, and he will think it a happy accident, and he will sleep tonight. The lady from Guildford Street leaves shellfish untouched. Every time, without exception and without comment, and she has an excellent way of arranging her knife and fork over the shell so that it reads as finished rather than refused. Whether it disagrees with her or she simply cannot abide it, you have no idea, and it is not your business to know. What is your business is that there are oysters in the first remove as it presently stands, and so there will also be a dish of soles in cream going up at the same moment, close enough to her that the footman can offer it without her having to ask, because a woman who has spent 30 years hiding a dislike will not announce it at your mistress's table. 2 of the 16 keep fish on a Friday. You have known that about one of those households since your 2nd month here, from a page in the book that says only, "No meat free, do not offer, do not remark." It is a Thursday, so it makes no difference tonight, and you note it anyway, because in 6 weeks there will be a dinner that falls on a Friday, and you would rather not be discovering it that afternoon. The widowed lady coming with her son is still in the 2nd stage of her mourning, out of the deepest black and into grey and violet, and everything you have learned about such households tells you she will expect plainness and be quietly relieved to find it. Not less food, less display, nothing shaped like a temple, nothing gilt, nothing set on fire. Your book says of her last visit here, 18 months ago, ate the clear soup, left the mock turtle, praised the bread. So the clear soup goes on, regardless of what else is offered, and it goes up first, and there is a plain wafer biscuit with it. And there is the one whose glass must be filled all evening with something that looks precisely like claret, and is not. He signed the pledge 9 years ago, and has not moved from it, and he will not make a speech about it at dinner, and he would rather die than sit there with a dry glass in front of him while 15 other glasses are filled. This is one of the things you and the butler are in complete agreement about, without ever having discussed it as a principle. He has the raspberry vinegar and the water put by and coloured in the right bottle, and the footman knows the seat. Nobody at that table will notice. That is the entire object. That is the constitution and the conscience of the thing. There is another column, and it matters as much. Of the 16, 9 have dined in this house before, and you can say what each of them praised. 3 of the 9 keep cooks who are better than you. You are not sentimental about that. One of the 3 trained in a house with a French chef and can produce a raised pie you would cross London to look at, and she will know, from one mouthful, exactly how long your consommé was clearing, and whether the aspic was made this morning or yesterday. She will not say anything unkind. She will say something exact to her own mistress in the carriage going home, and her mistress will repeat it at a luncheon in 10 days, and it will come back down to you eventually through a housemaid, as these things do. So the consommé will be clear enough to read the pattern of the plate through, because that is the one thing in a 9-course dinner that cannot be faked, and every professional in London knows it. 2 of the 16 will notice if the ice pudding is soft. 1 will notice and forgive it. 1 will notice and enjoy noticing. 4 of the 16 have never been here at all, which is its own kind of information, because it means 4 blank pages and 4 evenings of watching plates come back with real attention rather than habit. And 1 name on the list you have no page for whatsoever, and no household to attach her to, and nobody below stairs on this street who can tell you a single thing about her. She is the one you will be watching most closely tonight. Something worth slowing down for here, because the shape of the table is not the hostess's whim, and it constrains you more than most people would guess. The invitations for a dinner of this size go out 3 weeks in advance, sometimes a month, on a card or in a short note, and they are answered in writing within a day or two by anybody with manners. That is not ceremony for its own sake. That fortnight or 3 weeks is the working time in which a household prepares, and the reason your mistress could not simply produce 2 more guests this morning without it costing her something in your face is that a late acceptance eats into a schedule that was built around a number. Then comes the seating, which she has been at since Monday, with a sheet of paper and a good deal of crossing out. She is not arranging her friends by who will enjoy each other. She is arranging them by precedence, and precedence is a system with rules that do not bend for the comfort of the room. Rank first, and rank has an order that people of this class carry in their heads the way you carry the order of a stockpot. The most senior lady goes in on your master's arm and sits at his right. The most senior gentleman takes your mistress in and sits at hers. Everyone else is fitted between them, alternating man and woman down both sides. Married couples separated, husbands never beside their own wives. Get it wrong, and the wrongness is legible to every adult in the room before the soup has arrived. What it means for you is that you cannot control who sits where, and yet nearly every decision in that book of yours depends on it. The gentleman who cannot take rich sauces will be seated where his rank puts him, not where your plain roast can conveniently reach him. The lady who will not touch shellfish may end up at the far end from the soles. A dish offered from the wrong end of a table of 16 arrives at the 9th person, considerably less hot than it left, and at the 12th person picked over. So you have asked the butler in the passage, without appearing to ask anything, where 2 particular people are going. He told you. He always tells you. He understands the reason perfectly, and neither of you has ever said it aloud. You go back to the top of the list one more time, and you make the last of the choices. The oysters stay, with the soles beside them. The clear soup goes up alongside the thicker one, and there are 16 portions of each, because you would rather waste soup than be short of it. The plain roast joins the braised. The ice is decided. 2 of the sweet things you had considered are struck out, and 1 plain compote of pears goes on in their place, because there are 3 people at that table tonight who will be grateful for 1 dish in the last course that is not iced, not spun, not scented, and not shaped like anything at all. None of that is on the menu card. The card says what the dishes are, in the usual French, in a fair hand, and it will lie on the table between the candles for anybody to read. It does not say why. There is no line on it explaining that the fish course was doubled for 1 woman's sake, or that a bottle was colored for 1 man's, or that the second soup exists because of a pencil note made in this kitchen in the autumn of 1881. Your mistress will sit down at 8 o'clock tonight into a room arranged so exactly to the requirements of 16 separate people that several of them will go home with the vague and pleasant impression that she is unusually thoughtful. She is thoughtful. She is also, on the matter of who among her guests can eat what, entirely uninformed, and she will remain so, and there is no mechanism anywhere in this house by which she could ever find out. You put the weight back on the corner of the list. You close the book, and it goes into the drawer, and the drawer shuts. 11 o'clock, and the kitchen has settled into the long, steady middle of the day. The frantic part is over, and the frantic part has not yet begun. What sits between them is heat and patience, and a kind of work that cannot be hurried by any amount of wanting it done. The stockpot has been on since 6:30. It holds a knuckle of veal cracked across by the butcher's boy, a piece of shin of beef, the carcasses of 2 fowls, an onion browned on the hot plate for color, a carrot, a stick of celery, a bunch of herbs tied with thread, and 8 quarts of cold water that were brought up to heat so slowly that they took the better part of an hour to reach a tremble. That slowness was the whole point. A stock that boils goes cloudy and stays cloudy, and no amount of later cleverness will make it clear again, so the pot is kept at the temperature where the surface only shivers and a single lazy bubble breaks every few seconds near the edge. You have skimmed it 4 times this morning. The grey scum comes up in the first half hour and must be taken off before it breaks and disperses back through the liquid, and after that the fat rises in a thin gold film that you draw away with a shallow ladle held flat. The kitchen maid knows to skim it, and does skim it, but you check, because clarity in the soup tonight is not a matter of pride. It is a matter of one particular guest who eats almost nothing at other people's tables and can be relied upon to take clear soup, and if the clear soup arrives faintly muddy, he will take that instead of nothing and say nothing, and you will know. The consommé itself was started before the tradesman came, because clarifying is the one process in this kitchen that keeps its own timetable and refuses to be moved. Into cold, strained stock goes a pound of lean beef chopped fine, the whites of 4 eggs, the shells crushed in your fist, and a little of the vegetable finely shredded. All of it whisked together while the pot is cold. Then the heat comes up under it, gradually, and you keep whisking until the surface begins to whiten and thicken, and then you stop, and you take your hands away entirely, and you do not touch it again. What happens next is the part of cooking that has always struck you as closest to a trick, though there is nothing tricky in it. The egg white sets as it warms, and as it sets, it draws every particle of cloud in the liquid up into itself, and it rises and knits into a grey crust that floats on top like the scab on a healing thing. Beneath that crust, if you have been careful, the stock is going clear as brown glass. A cook who loses her nerve and stirs at this stage will break the crust and put all of it straight back into the soup, and there is no second chance. Only a fresh pound of beef and another 2 hours you do not have. An hour and a half of the barest simmer, and then the straining. A flannel jelly bag scalded first with boiling water and wrung out, hung on its wooden stand over a clean basin. You ladle the consommé through the crust rather than tipping the pot, so the crust itself becomes the first filter, and you let it fall through the flannel at whatever speed it chooses. It cannot be pressed. Squeezing a jelly bag forces the cloud through the cloth, and the whole morning goes with it. When the first basin runs slightly thick, you pour it back through the same bag, over the same bed of sediment, and let it come through a second time, and what finally stands in the basin is the color of weak tea, and you can read the maker's mark on the bottom of the china through 8 inches of it. That is the soup. Nobody at the table tonight will remark on it beyond a word, and the word will be about the hostess. The jellies come next, and they come now, at 11 in the morning, for a reason that has nothing to do with convenience. They need hours in the cold to set, and if they are not in the larder by 1 o'clock, they will not be firm at 8, and a jelly that is not firm at 8 is a catastrophe that happens in public. 2 calf's feet, split and blanched and simmered since early morning in a separate pot, have given up their liquor, and that liquor is what will make the aspic. It is the old way, and still the best way, and the reason is flavor rather than economy. You could use isinglass instead, which is made from the swimming bladders of sturgeon and comes in pale translucent shreds that look like something washed off a beach, and which sets beautifully and tastes of very little. There is also the packeted gelatine that comes in leaves now, and which the household manuals discuss with a certain caution, and which you keep in the store cupboard for emergencies and do not otherwise mention. The clear jelly for the sweet molds gets the same treatment as the consommé, egg white and shell whisked in cold, brought slowly up, allowed to crust, strained through a scalded flannel bag, and then strained again. Lemon peel and a stick of cinnamon for scent, sugar, a glass of sherry stirred in at the end when the heat has dropped, because heat drives the flavor of wine straight out through the top of the pot and wastes it. Then the molds. They live on the high shelf above the dresser, copper, tinned inside, and there are more of them in this kitchen than there are pieces of clothing in your box upstairs. A tall fluted one, a castle-shaped one with a fretted top that the housemaid's daughter once called a church. Small dariole molds in a nested row, a great domed one for the centerpiece that takes 3 quarts and weighs a surprising amount empty. Each one is rinsed in cold water and left wet, because a wet mold releases and a dry one clings. Here is what stands behind all this care. A jelly is judged in the 4 seconds after it comes out of its mold, in front of 16 people, in candlelight. It either stands up with its fluting sharp and its edges holding, or it slumps, and if it slumps it does so slowly, in view of everybody, and there is no recovering the moment. In warm weather, you increase the setting liquor and reduce the wine. In this house, in a hot kitchen in late spring, you increase it further than the books tell you to, because the books were written for a cool larder, and yours sits below a street that has been in full sun since 9. Which brings you to the ice. And the ice is the part of this kitchen that most people would find strangest if they thought about it at all. Heat in this house is cheap. Coal comes in by the sack down the chute, into the coal hole under the pavement, and it costs shillings, and there is always more of it. Coal has to be bought, carried, hoarded, and watched, and it costs several times what the same weight of coal does, and it is disappearing every hour of every day, whether you use it or not. It arrives by cart from the ice merchant in blocks wrapped in sacking and straw, and it comes to London from a very long way off. Some of it was cut in America, off the frozen lakes of Massachusetts, and shipped across the Atlantic in insulated holds packed with sawdust. More of it now comes from Norway, out of the fjords and the mountain lakes, in the same trade, sailed into the Thames and unloaded at the wharves, and taken to great brick-lined wells sunk into the ground near the canal, where it sits in the dark, in quantities you cannot really picture until it is sold on by the hundredweight to houses like this one. Yours goes into the ice safe in the larder, a wooden chest lined with zinc, packed round with felt and charcoal, with a drip tray beneath and a bung to let the meltwater out. You break the block with a mallet and a needle when you want it small. The scullery maid crushes it in a canvas bag with the flat of a wooden beetle, and it is one of the few jobs in this kitchen she is glad of in June and dreads in February. Tonight's iced pudding needs it twice over. Once as ice, packed in a wooden pail around the metal freezing pot, with coarse rock salt strewn between the layers, because salt and ice together make a cold far below anything ice alone can manage. And once again afterwards, as the packing that holds the finished mold hard in the cave until the moment it goes up. The freezing is turned by hand, and it is nobody's idea of a treat. The custard goes into the pot, the lid goes on, the pot is worked round and round in the salted ice, while the mixture freezes onto the inside walls. Every few minutes the lid comes off, and the frozen part is scraped down with a long spatula and beaten back into the liquid part, and then it goes round again, and the arm that does the scraping aches in a very particular place between the shoulder and the neck. 25 minutes, perhaps 40, depending on the weather and the salt and how full the pail was to begin with. There are patent machines now, with a crank and a paddle inside, that claim to do it in 5, and a woman who has just this year set up a cookery school off Mortimer Street is selling one of them and will shortly write a whole book about nothing but ices. You have seen the machine advertised. You have not seen the money for it. The pudding goes into a pewter mold with a close lid, sealed round the join with butter so no salt water can find its way in, and then buried in the cave under fresh ice and salt, where it will harden for the rest of the afternoon. 2 jelly molds go into the larder yourself, carried one in each hand, and set down on the marble slab in the far corner, where the wall backs onto earth rather than street, and the temperature drops by several degrees the moment you step in. You settle them level. A jelly set on a slope sets crooked, and stands crooked, and looks like carelessness. While you are in there, you lift the wet cloth off the turbot. The flesh is firm under your thumb and springs back. The eye is clear and full. The gills, when you part them, are the right dark red. Whatever else that fishmonger sent you this morning, he did not send you a fish that has been sitting on his slab since Tuesday, and you put the cloth back and rearrange the broken ice around it and shut the larder door. Luncheon is at 1:30, and luncheon is the meal nobody in this house thinks about at all, which is precisely why it costs you what it does. Upstairs it will be understood as almost nothing. Cold food set out on the sideboard, a hot dish or two, the children brought down from the schoolroom or fed in it, depending on the mistress's mood and the state of her mourning. Nobody dresses for it. Nobody remembers it afterward. In the household books it barely registers, and in the memoirs that gentlemen of this street will write in 30 years' time, it will not appear once. But it must be cooked, and it must be cooked by you, on the same range, in the same 3 hours in which the whole architecture of a dinner for 16 is being raised. So there is cold mutton from Sunday, sliced thin, and laid overlapping on a dish with a little aspic trimmed from yesterday's batch, because a cold joint presented as a cold joint looks like leftovers, and a cold joint presented with jelly and a border of cut beetroot looks like a dish. There is a hot omelette with fine herbs, made to order, because the barrister comes home from chambers on a Thursday and eats an omelette, and has eaten an omelette on Thursdays for 4 years. There are potatoes. There is a macaroni dish keeping warm at the side of the oven, where the heat is gentlest. There is bread and butter and cheese and the end of a cold apple tart, and the schoolroom tray goes up with milk pudding on it, because the youngest has been off her food since Monday, and milk pudding is what one gives. You do all this while a stock pot is going, while a consommé is being watched, while a pudding is buried in ice, and while the puff paste is resting in the coldest corner of the larder, waiting for you to come back to it. The omelette takes 4 minutes and requires your whole attention for all 4. That is the shape of the day. Not one long task, but 40 short ones, interleaved so tightly that any one of them going wrong pushes into the next. The paste is the thing you are truly working around. Puff paste is a morning job. Every cook in London will tell you so, and the manuals say it too. You want the coldest hands, and the coldest slab, and the coldest butter you can get. And in a basement kitchen in August, that means before the range has properly taken hold. You began it at 6:30, before the family breakfast, in the 10 minutes while the kettles were coming up. Flour and a little salt and water, and just enough butter worked in to bind, a smooth, firm lump, rolled out, the great flat slab of butter laid in the middle of it, the paste folded over, like a letter into an envelope. Then you turn it. You roll it away from you in one direction only, into a long rectangle, and fold it in 3, and give it a quarter turn, and roll it again, and fold it again, and then it goes back into the cold to rest for 20 minutes while you go and do 4 other things. 6 turns in all, with a rest between each pair. Each turn doubles and redoubles the layers of butter caught between the layers of paste. By the 6th turn, there are more than 700 distinct leaves of butter and dough stacked in that lump. And when it meets the heat of the oven, every one of those butter layers turns to steam at once and lifts the leaf above it, and that is all a vol au vent case is. Steam and arithmetic. If the butter warms, it works into the paste instead of lying between it, and you get pastry that is short and heavy and pleasant enough, but that will not rise, and a vol au vent case that will not rise is a saucer. So the whole business is a running argument with the temperature of your own kitchen. You take the paste out of the larder, you work it fast on the marble with cold hands, and you put it back before the heat can find it, 6 times, between other things. The last turn goes on at 1:45, and the cases are cut out with a plain round cutter, and a second smaller cutter pressed halfway down into each one to make the lid that you will lift off after baking. They go onto a wetted baking sheet, because a wet sheet holds them, and a greased sheet lets them slide sideways and rise crooked. And they will bake in the fierce top heat of the oven, while the oven is still at its hottest, in 20 minutes, before you drop the heat for the things that come later. Now, while those are in, look at the walls. Along the whole length of the kitchen wall, on iron hooks, in strict order from largest to smallest, hangs the batterie de cuisine, and it is the single most valuable thing in this room by a very wide margin. It is not yours. It belongs to the house. It came with the lease, and it will stay when you go, and the housekeeper's inventory lists every piece of it by name and size. Copper, all of it. Stockpots that hold 3 gallons and want 2 hands and a braced back to lift full. Deep saucepans in a graded run of 8 sizes. Sauté pans, a fish kettle long enough to take a salmon whole, with a perforated tray inside to lift it out unbroken. Preserving pans, a great flat bain-marie pan that sits over water and holds 6 small pots of sauce at a bare simmer without any of them catching. Molds for jelly and for cream and for ices, fluted and turreted and shaped like sheaves of wheat. A copper stockpot of that size costs more than a scullery maid earns in a year. A full battery for a house like this, bought new from one of the ironmongers off Oxford Street, would come to something between £40 and £60, which is to say rather more than your annual wage, and considerably more than the annual wage of everyone below you in this kitchen combined. Copper is used because copper takes heat evenly and fast, and lets go of it fast, which is the whole of sauce work. But copper cannot touch food directly, so the inside of every one of those pans is lined with a thin coat of tin, and tin wears. It wears from the spoon, from the whisk, from the scouring, from acid, from ordinary use. It thins at the base first, and then goes patchy, and then shows the pink of the copper underneath. And a pan showing copper is a pan out of service until the tinker has been. The retinning man comes round with his fire and his flux, or the pans go out in a basket to the coppersmith, and it costs a few pence an inch, and it is a running expense in every kitchen in London that nobody upstairs has ever once thought about. Copper left wet or left dirty turns green, and green copper spoils what you put in it, and so a pan is never, ever put away damp. Never. You have said this to 2 kitchen maids in 4 years, and you will say it to a 3rd, which brings you to the scullery. Everything you are doing today ends up in there. Count it honestly, because nobody else ever will. 9 courses, going up in sequence, with plated and garnished dishes at each remove. Every sauce has its own pan, and its own bain-marie pot, and its own spoon, and its own strainer. Every soup has its stock pot, and its clearing pan, and its tammy cloth. The fish has its kettle, and its tray, and its cloths. There are the pastry sheets, and the pastry boards, and the moulds, and the mixing basins, and the sieves, and the whisks, and the 24 little dariole moulds, and the knives, and the mortar, and the chopping boards, and the vegetable pans, and then the whole separate weight of the family's breakfast and luncheon, and the servants' dinner running underneath all of it. Somewhere between 100 and 150 separate vessels will be dirtied in this kitchen today. Not plates. Plates and glasses and cutlery are the footman's business, and the butler's, washed upstairs in the pantry, and there are perhaps 300 of those. This is only the cooking. They are washed by a girl of 15 in a stone room 10 feet by 8, with one small window at the top of the wall, and there is no hot water anywhere in this house except what comes out of the boiler beside the range, so every drop she uses she carries. Soda in the water for grease, sand and salt, and a cut lemon or a little vinegar for the copper, whiting, and a cloth for the finish, and each piece dried by hand and hung back on its own hook, in its own place, in the order it belongs in, because if a pan is not where it should be at 7 o'clock tomorrow morning, the fault will be found in 15 seconds, and it will be found in front of everybody. She earns £11 a year, and her food, and her tea, and sugar. She sleeps in the attic on the 5th floor, up 4 flights, and she is up before you are, and when the dinner is finally over tonight, she will still have 2 hours in front of her. You made a decision about her at the start of the week, which is that the copper goes to her in batches through the day, rather than all at once at 11 o'clock at night, and you send the kitchen maid in to help her at the worst of it, and you have never once told the mistress that you do this. It is not a kindness exactly. A girl worked to the edge breaks things, and broken copper is an inventory question, and inventory questions come to you. The paste cases come out at 2:10, risen the full 3 inches, pale gold and hollow, and you lift each lid off with the point of a knife and scrape out the soft crumb inside and set them on a rack in the warm. And now the kitchen is at its hottest, and there are 3 sauces alive on the stove at once. The Espagnole at the back, reduced and reducing still, 3 days in the making and needing only to be left alone. A bechamel at the side, thickened and steady, waiting to be divided later into 2 different finishings. And the 3rd one in the middle, the one the maid lost this morning, begun again from nothing 40 minutes ago, and now at the exact stage where it will either come together or refuse to. You stand at the center of the table with the menu book open, and you do the arithmetic you have been doing all day, backwards from 8 o'clock. The joint wants 2 hours and a quarter and a rest. The soup must leave this room at 3 minutes to 8. The oven must be fierce at 7:30 and gentle at 7:45, and it cannot be both, so something has to move. You pick up the pencil. 3 o'clock is when the day turns, and today it turns against you. It does not arrive as one thing. Disaster in a professional kitchen almost never does. It arrives as 3 small facts that were each survivable on their own and are not survivable together, and it arrives at the exact hour when there is no longer enough day left to be clever slowly. The first fact is the fish. You have known about the fish since the area door at 9 o'clock, when the boy set it down on the slab, and you saw at once that it was not the fish you ordered. You took it anyway, on a condition, because the alternative was no turbot at all. But at 9 o'clock, the dinner was for 14. You go into the fish larder now with a candle, because the larder is below the level of the street, and even at 3 in the afternoon, it is a room of shadows, and you lift the wet cloth and look at what you have, and you do the sum properly for the first time. A turbot weighing 7 pounds, gutted, with head and fin and the great flat frame of bone still in it. Off that you will get, honestly, 10 good portions, perhaps 11 if you are willing to send up a plate that a serious diner would recognize as a scrap, and 2 of the people sitting down tonight are serious diners. You need 16. The gap is 5 portions of fish, and the fishmonger's cart will not come again today, and the shops that would sell you a second turbot at 3:30 on a winter afternoon would sell you one that had been sitting since Tuesday. The second fact reaches you before you have set the cloth back down. The kitchen maid calls through the doorway in the particular flattened voice servants use when they have already decided to be blamed, and you know from the voice alone which pan she means. The Dutch sauce. The one for the fish, butter and yolks and lemon, held over water, the most temperamental thing in the room, and she has been minding it with one hand while turning the paste cases with the other, and she has fed the fire under the water bath because the water had gone quiet. When you look into the pan, the sauce has broken into what it always breaks into, a thin yellow oil floating over a grainy curd, the butter and the egg divorced and unwilling to speak. 40 minutes of work, and more importantly, 8 yolks and 1.5 pounds of butter in a household where the cook's accounts are looked at. The third fact is only the number 16, which is not new, but which is now standing behind the other 2 with its arms folded. Here is what does not happen. You do not raise your voice, and you do not put your hands over your face, and you do not go upstairs. A cook who goes upstairs at 3 o'clock has already lost the evening, because the moment the household above learns that something is wrong, the something becomes a thing that happened at their dinner rather than a thing that did not. You have 4 hours and 57 minutes. You take the pencil and you start assigning them. The fish first, because the fish is the hard one. The turbot cannot be sent up whole now in any case, so you stop trying to save the shape of it. Off the bone then, into fillets, folded and poached in a court bouillon, and dressed on a long dish, with the sauce over and a border of small potatoes turned to the size of olives. 12 portions, arranged so that 12 looks like abundance rather than division, and beside it, at the same remove, a second fish dish that you did not plan and now announce, because you have 24 smelts in the larder that were bought for tomorrow's luncheon and are better tonight than they will be in the morning. Egged, crumbed, fried at the last minute, sent up in a napkin with cut lemon and a green sauce, and any guest who wants fish twice may have fish twice, and any guest who wants only a little is offered a small thing to take a little of. That is the trick, and it is worth saying plainly because it is the whole art of the position. You have not filled the gap. You have changed the shape of the gap so that nobody can see the edge of it. Then, the entrees. There were to be 4. You promote the cutlets, which were planned as the modest one, the dish that fills a corner and is not looked at, and you dress them properly instead, in a row against a puree with the sauce beneath rather than over, which takes 11 minutes more and moves them from a corner dish to a dish that a woman leans forward to look at. And the paste cases, cooling on their rack, were to be filled and sent as one dish of 8. You will make them a dish of 16 by cutting the filling with more mushroom and less chicken, and by trusting that a smaller case eaten hot beats a larger case eaten warm. The sauce gets a clock. This is the part that separates a cook from a person who can cook. You do not simply begin trying to rescue it and see how you get on, because the trying will eat the afternoon in 5-minute increments, and you will look up at 5:30 with nothing. You give it until 20 minutes past 3. Fresh yolk in a clean basin, warmed, a spoonful of warm water beaten into it, and then the broken sauce added drop by drop, off the fire entirely, working from the wrist. If it comes back by 20 past, you have your sauce. If it has not come back by 20 past, you tip it into the fat jar, and the fish goes up under a shrimp sauce made from the bechamel you already have standing at the side of the stove, which is not as good, and which not one person at that table will identify as a substitution, because they were never told what was coming. You say all of this out loud, in order, to the 2 of them, and then you look at the clock and go back to the pastry. This is worth slowing down for, because the thing that just saved you was not your quickness, it was the menu itself. A 9-course Victorian dinner looks, from the outside, like pure excess. 2 soups, 2 fishes, 4 entrees, a joint and its accompaniments, game, 2 sweets, a savory, an ice, dessert. 16 people will not eat their way through that. A careful diner takes a little of the soup, a little of the fish, 1 entree out of 4, a slice of the joint, a bird, 1 sweet, and passes the rest with a small shake of the head, and considers herself to have dined extremely well, which means that of everything that leaves this kitchen tonight, a great deal of it exists in order to be declined. That redundancy is not stupidity. It is politeness, first, because a table where a guest is offered a single dish is a table where a guest who dislikes that dish goes hungry in public, and that must never be allowed to happen. But it is also, and no cookery book of the period will tell you this in so many words, a system of insurance. When there are 2 dishes at every remove, and 4 in the middle, a dish can fail and be quietly withdrawn, and the remove still stands. A joint can be 20 minutes late, and the entrees can be spun out to cover it. A turbot can come up short and be met by a dish of fried smelts that nobody was expecting, and the guest reads generosity where the cook knows there was a hole. The structure absorbs disaster. The elaborateness that costs you 14 hours on your feet is the same elaborateness that means those 14 hours cannot be destroyed by 1 broken sauce. Every professional cook in London understood this, and none of them said it, because saying it would have been an admission that failure was ever anticipated. Which brings you to the other thing, the one that governs your whole working life. Nobody upstairs will ever learn that anything happened this afternoon. Not tonight, not next week, not ever. the mistress will receive a slightly altered menu at 4 o'clock and will find it agreeable. She will not know that a fish came in 2 pounds light, or that 8 yolks went into the fat jar, or that a girl of 19 cried into a copper pan in the scullery passage at 3:10 and was given a cup of tea and sent back in. She will know only that her dinner for 16 went up on time and came down praised. And your professional value, the whole of it, is built out of things like this that did not become events. That is a strange way to earn a living, and it has a price in both directions. The price to you is that competence looks like nothing. There is no ledger anywhere in that house, recording that on a Thursday in 1883, the cook rearranged a 9-course dinner in 11 minutes with a pencil. The price to the household, though they never think of it as a price, is that they cannot tell the difference between a good cook and a lucky one, and so they pay for reputation instead, which is why a cook with a plain character and no incidents can ask £35 a year, and a cook whose last 3 households ended without a single apology sent from the kitchen can ask 50, and neither figure has much to do with what either woman can actually do with a turbot. The sauce comes back at 18 minutes past 3, 2 yolks poorer and glossy and thick, and you stand over it for a moment longer than you need to. Then you sit down at the end of the kitchen table with the menu book, and you rewrite the card in your fair hand, the one you keep for this, upright and small, and very slightly showy. Fillets of turbot in place of the whole fish, fried smelts added, the cutlets given their proper dressing and their proper name, and you choose the wording with real care, because the same 3 changes can be written as retreat or as advance, and you write them as advance. 2 fish dishes reads richer than 1. Fillets, arranged and sauced, reads more considered than a great flat fish carried in on a plank. Nothing on that card admits a single thing. You blot it, and you send it up with the kitchen maid, and it comes back down 40 minutes later with a pencil tick in the corner and a message that the mistress is very pleased with the smelts. At 6 o'clock, the noise above you changes character, and you hear it the way you would hear a change in a fire. It is not louder, it is differently distributed. All day the house has made its sounds in the middle, in the hall and the morning room and the passage, and now the sound goes upward and outward to the edges. Cans of hot water going up the back stairs, 3 flights of them, and the housemaid's shoes on every tread. Bedroom bells, 4 of them in 20 minutes, ringing on their coiled wires along the kitchen passage ceiling, so that you know without looking which room wants what. Somewhere above, a window sash going up, because a room that has had a fire in it since 5 o'clock is too warm for a woman being laced into anything. Then the dressing bell, and then a silence that is not silence at all, but 16 people in 8 houses across 2 square miles, all doing the same thing at the same time, which is the part of a dinner party nobody thinks of as part of the dinner party. Down here, the last 2 hours begin, and they have a shape you could draw. The joint has been on since 5:30, a saddle of mutton, and you have looked at it twice and touched it once. The birds are trussed and larded on the dresser waiting their turn, because they take less time than anybody upstairs believes, and will be ruined by 15 minutes of good intentions. The clear soup has been standing off the heat since 4, and you bring it back gently now, gently being the whole art of it, because a consommé that boils goes cloudy, and a cloudy consommé is a public statement about your competence made in front of a table of witnesses. The turbot fillets lie in their buttered paper. The smelts are floured and waiting, and they will go into the fat at 10 minutes to 8, and not 1 minute earlier. because a fried smelt has a life of about 6 minutes and then becomes a small, hot disappointment. The kitchen maid is garnishing the entree dishes at the end of the table, and you watch her hands more than the dishes. Cutlets stood up against one another in a ring, each one with its frill, the mashed potato piped in the center of the ring and browned at the edge, the whole thing needing to arrive at the dining room table, looking like something a person built on purpose, rather than something that slid. The vol au vent case is filled at the last moment, not now, because pastry and sauce are enemies who must be introduced as late as possible. Sauces go over water, 3 of them, in their small covered pans set into the bain-marie, which is nothing more romantic than a shallow copper bath of water kept just below the boil, and it is the single most useful object in the room at this hour. A sauce over direct heat is a sauce you are losing. A sauce over water will hold for 40 minutes and hold its gloss, and you can turn your back on it, and turning your back on things is what allows one woman to send up 9 courses. The hot closet is loaded from 20 past 7. Plates first, dozens of them, and the covers, and the dish for the joint, and the sauce boats, which people forget. A hot sauce in a cold boat is a lukewarm sauce by the time it reaches the 3rd person on the left. You have known cooks blamed for exactly that, and the boat was innocent because nobody warmed it. Here is the difficulty at the center of all of it, and it is worth slowing down for, because it is the thing about Victorian service that is hardest to picture from a modern kitchen. There is no clock in the dining room. There is a clock on the mantel of the dining room, certainly, but it is furniture, not an instrument, and nobody in that room is going to consult it and then tell you anything. The dining room does not know what your fat is doing. Your kitchen does not know whether the gentleman on the hostess's right has been talking for 11 minutes without pausing long enough for anyone to lift a fork. The 2 rooms are separated by a stone staircase, a green baize door, a passage, and a floor, and the only things that cross that gap are dishes going up, plates coming down, and signals. The signals are a small language, and you are fluent in it. The dining room bell, which means send up, and which you will hear 4 times tonight, in ways that are perfectly clear, and once in a way that is ambiguous. The footman, appearing at the kitchen door, with an empty hand and a particular expression, which means they are slow, hold everything. The same footman appearing at a run, which means they are fast, and something you thought you had a quarter of an hour for, you now have 4 minutes for. The kitchen maid stationed at the foot of the stairs from 7:45 onward, doing nothing but listening, which is not idleness but a posted watch. And there is the distance. From your table to that table is 31 stairs and about 18 yards of passage, carried by a man in a tailcoat who cannot hurry visibly, because hurrying visibly is itself a kind of failure. Call it 50 seconds for a dish, more if the dish is heavy and hot and has a domed cover that must be lifted off level so that the condensation on its underside does not run down onto the garnish and make a grey pool. 50 seconds is nothing, and 50 seconds is everything. A soufflé will not survive it, which is why a soufflé at a dinner of 16 in a house of this arrangement is a piece of bravado rather than a plan. Fried fish loses its crispness in the covered dish on the way. Sauce skins over, ice softens, and softens faster in a warm passage than anyone believes. So you cook not for the moment the dish leaves your hands, but for the moment it reaches a plate, and those are 2 different moments. And every experienced cook in London holds that gap in her head as a permanent correction, the way a gunner holds windage. You undercook by a hair. You send the sauce a shade thicker than it should be, knowing it will loosen in the boat. You send the fish covered, but with the cover set a little askew, one small deliberate crack of it, which the butler will close before it enters the room, and which buys you 30 seconds of steam, not settling on the crumb. Nobody taught you that. You worked it out in a house in Camberwell when you were 24, and you have never told anybody, and you never will, and it is worth more to you than the wages. At the point the dish leaves the kitchen, it stops being yours. That boundary is precise, and it is the tensest line in the house. Below it, in the kitchen and the scullery and the larder, you hold absolute authority, and the mistress herself will not come down without a reason and will not stay long. Above it, the butler holds the same kind of authority over the pantry, the plate, the glass, the wine, the 2 footmen, and the order and pace of service. You do not tell him when to send in. He does not tell you how to sauce. And yet, you are running one single operation together, on 2 floors, with no way of speaking to one another for 3 hours, except through a young man carrying dishes. Which means the friction, when it comes, is always about timing, and always deniable. If the courses go up too slowly, the fault is in the kitchen. If they go up promptly, and are held in the pantry while the wine is changed, the fault is not in the kitchen, but the dish is cold all the same, and the person upstairs eating a cold cutlet has no way of knowing which of you to blame, and will settle on you, because a cutlet is food, and food is the cook. You have had that argument twice in 4 years, both times in the passage, both times conducted in low voices at high speed, with the door to the servants' hall shut, and both times settled by a compromise that neither of you called a compromise. He now sends the kitchen maid down at the end of each course, rather than waiting to be asked. You now hold the entrees 1 degree hotter than you would like, so that his delays cost the household nothing. Nobody upstairs will ever know that this treaty exists, and the whole evening rests on it. At 25 minutes to 8, you leave the kitchen for 4 minutes, which is the longest you will be away from it until 11. You wash your hands and your forearms at the scullery sink, in water as hot as you can stand, with the yellow soap, and you do it properly because you have been handling raw mutton and flour and a scalded thumb from the bain-marie, and because a cook's hands are inspected by nobody and matter enormously. The scald is across the base of your left thumb, and you have not looked at it since it happened at 4 o'clock. You take off the coarse apron and hang it on the nail. You put on the clean one, the second one, stiff and cold and very white, and you change your cap, and you tuck the loose hair up at the back, where it has been coming down since noon. You do not do this because anyone will see you. Nobody will see you. It is not impossible that no member of the family will look at you once between now and Sunday. You do it because at 8 o'clock a thing begins that you are in charge of, and you have never in your life begun it in a dirty apron. Back in the kitchen, the fat is at the right heat, the smelts go in, the soup stands in its tureen, with the cover on, and the plates hot beneath, and the maid is at the foot of the stairs, with her head turned. The bell goes at 4 minutes past 8, which is exactly right, 4 minutes being what it takes 16 people to find their places. You lift the tureen yourself, and you hand it over, and you let go of it. You will not see the dining room tonight. You have not seen it in 4 years, except twice in daylight, when the carpets were up and the table was in pieces against the wall, and once, at 2:30 in the morning, with a candle, looking for a copper spoon that had gone up and not come down. You do not know what the room looks like full. You know the ceiling of it, because it is the floor above your head, and you can hear where people are sitting, by the way the boards take their weight. What you have instead of the room is the plates. They come down on the back stairs in relays, in the arms of the footman and the parlour-maid, and they are set on the long deal table by the scullery door, in the order they came off the cloth. And while your hands are busy with the next course, your eyes go over them, the way another woman's eyes might go over a page of print. 16 plates a course, 9 courses, something close to 140 separate accounts of the evening, delivered to you at intervals of 11 or 12 minutes, and you read every one of them without stopping what you are doing. The soup plates come first, at 19 minutes past 8. Clear soup and thick, offered together as they must be, and the count tells you the room straight away. 11 of the clear, 5 of the thick. The clear is the harder dish and the more respected one, and 11 people chose it, which means 11 people at that table know what a consommé costs in labor, and were paying you a compliment before they had swallowed anything. Of the 11, 9 plates come back, scraped to the glaze. 1 is half full and set down carelessly, with the spoon dropped into it. 1 is untouched entirely, the surface unbroken, still faintly warm. You already know whose that is, and you will know for certain when the fish comes down. Of the 5 thick soups, 4 are finished, and 1 has been eaten around the edges, the middle left, which is what people do when they have decided they do not like something but do not wish to be seen deciding it. Puree of artichoke. You will make a note against that house tomorrow, if you can work out which house it was, and the footman will tell you when he has a moment, because he can put a plate to a chair and a chair to a name faster than anyone in the building. The fish goes up at 25 minutes past 8, and it is the course you have been anxious about since 9 o'clock this morning, and it comes down and tells you that you were right to do what you did. The turbot, cut and portioned and sauced and dressed in the smaller dish, rather than laid whole as a great white slab, went round 16 places, and came back with almost nothing on any plate. Nobody sends turbot away. What you cannot know, and what you want very much to know, is whether anyone at that table understood that a whole fish was intended and a portioned dish arrived instead. 2 of them will have understood. You could name them. The smelts come back nearly as clean, except for 2 plates. On one of those 2 plates, the fish have been moved to the side, arranged neatly, deliberately, entirely uneaten, exactly as the shellfish were moved to the side of a plate in this house in March, and in October before that, and at the Wimpole Street dinner 2 winters ago, according to a kitchen maid who now works in Highgate. Not shellfish this time. Small fried fish, eaten whole, head and all. It is the same objection, and you have now seen it 3 times, and tomorrow you will write in the book that this lady does not eat anything that is served entire, and that when she dines here again, she is to have a cutlet of something large and filleted, while the rest of the table has whatever small thing is in season. She will never mention it. You will never mention it. She will simply find, for the rest of her life, that she dines comfortably in this house, and she will not know why, and she may well tell her hostess so. The other plate is the untouched one from the soup. It comes down untouched again. By 10 minutes to 9 the entrees are up, and this is the course you built to hide a disaster in, and here is where the evening surprises you. 3 entrees went round. The sweetbreads in their sauce, which is the expensive one, and the one intended to carry the course. The mutton cutlets with a puree, which are honest and plain, and were promoted from a lower place on the menu at 3 o'clock this afternoon to fill a gap. And the chicken en casserole, with the vegetables cut small, which is the dish you make when you want to feed people, rather than impress them. The sweetbreads come back well eaten, but not adored. The chicken comes back finished. And the cutlets, the emergency, the plain dish you were faintly ashamed of, come back with the dish empty, and the footman saying that two gentlemen ask for them a second time, and one of the two is a man who has said in this house, out loud, at this table, in the hearing of a servant who repeated it to you within the hour, that English cooking is a failure of imagination, and that he does not understand why anyone bothers with mutton. He had it twice. This is the thing that food tells you and conversation does not. A man will say what he wishes to be thought to eat, and then his plate comes downstairs and tells you what he actually wanted, and the two are frequently strangers to one another. You are not scornful about it. You have built half your professional life on the gap between the two, because a cook who feeds people what they say they want is a cook whose dinners are admired and not enjoyed, and admiration does not keep a household. You will put mutton in front of that man every time he comes, dressed handsomely, called something in French, and he will go on telling the table that English cooking is a failure of imagination while eating it. At 9:20, the saddle of mutton goes up, and the boards overhead have gone quieter, which is the sound of a table that has arrived at the substantial part of the evening and settled into it. The joint comes down, carved down to the bone on one side and barely cut on the other, which is the butler's doing and not yours, and there is nothing to read in it except that 16 people were fed and that the meat was tender enough to carve thin. The game comes down at 10:10, and it is with the game that you look properly at the 5th plate from the left, the one that has come back whole through 4 courses. A partridge untouched is not a shy appetite. It is not a dislike, because nobody at this level of society dislikes roast game. You have been told who is sitting there. She is 19 years old, married in June, and this is very likely the largest dinner she has been placed at as a wife rather than as somebody's daughter. She has 16 people around her, a menu in French, 4 glasses at her right hand, a stranger of some eminence on either side, and a butler behind her, filling things she did not ask for, and she is being watched by every woman in the room in the particular way that a new wife is watched. You are 38 years old and you have run a kitchen at full stretch for 15 hours today, and you would not eat either. You send up, unasked, on the sweets course, a small plate of the plainest thing you have, and you tell the footman where to put it, and he does, because he understands the errand without being told. It is not kindness exactly. It is your trade. A guest who cannot eat is a guest who will remember the evening badly, and evenings are what you make. Then it is 10:05, and the ice pudding goes up, and the whole day narrows to it. Everything else you cook tonight could be held. Soup waits, sauces wait over water, a joint rests and improves. Ice does none of that. It was churned in the freezing pail in the coldest corner of the scullery this morning, with rough ice and salt packed round the mould, turned by hand until the maid's fingers were useless, then buried again in a fresh pail of ice and salt in the larder, and left absolutely alone for 6 hours, and from the instant it comes out of that pail, it is dying. You have the time it takes to turn it out, garnish it, carry it up 2 flights and along a passage, and serve it to 16 people. Call it 10 minutes, call it 11, if the butler is quick and the conversation does not stop him at the door. Beyond that, the shape goes soft at the base, and the whole thing is a puddle in a silver dish, and everybody sees it, all 16 of them, at once, in candlelight. The pudding is what the evening will be judged by, because it is last, because it is cold, in a warm room, and because everyone at that table knows what cold costs, in July and in January alike. You bought the ice from the merchant in blocks, and you paid for it, and it was expensive, and its entire purpose is to be visible for 90 seconds at the end of a long meal. It goes up at 5 minutes past 10, and the dishes come down at 20 past, and the shapes have held their edges, and there is nothing left in either mould but the smear, where the spoon went round it twice. The footman comes down after the cheese, with his coat unbuttoned at last, and tells you that a lady asked twice how it was done, and that the barrister said something about his own household that made the table laugh, and that everyone heard it, and you do not ask what it was, because you can construct it perfectly well. Somebody complimented his wife on her cook. He said something modest and proprietary. That is how it works, and you have known that since you were 19. By 25 past 11, the last plates are down, and the kitchen is not a kitchen anymore. It is a room with every surface occupied, copper standing in stacks with the sauce going hard in the bottom of it, the deal table invisible under china, the range still hot and now useless to you, cloths on the floor, a bowl of ice water with the last of the ice going to nothing in it. The scullery is filling with water and steam, and the maid is in there with her sleeves above the elbow and her face wet, and she has been standing at that sink since 6 this morning. The butler comes to the door and does not come in. He says that the mistress is very pleased. That is the message. It comes to you from the woman who chose the menu with you at 10 this morning, by way of a man in a black coat standing in a doorway at 25 minutes past 11. You say thank you, and you ask him to tell her so, and you turn back to the copper. The washing up is not the end of the day. It is only the largest thing left in it. You do not go to bed while the kitchen looks like this, and not because anyone would come down and check. Nobody will come down. The reason is simpler and harder than supervision. Breakfast has to leave this room before 8 tomorrow morning, and the fire has to be lit before 7 to make that possible, and the girl who lights it cannot lay a fire in a grate full of last night's clinker, and you cannot make a sauce in a pan that has sauce dried into the seam of it from the night before. Every hour you leave undone tonight arrives tomorrow with interest. So the two of you and the kitchen maid work through it in the order that has always been the order. The copper first, because copper cannot be left to soak. Water standing in a tinned pan overnight lifts the tinning and pits the metal underneath, and retinning a large stockpot costs money that comes out of the household books with your name attached to the reason. Each piece is scoured with sand and a little vinegar, rinsed, and then dried at once with a cloth kept only for that, and set on its shelf in its own place, largest at the left, smallest at the right, handles all turned the same way. It looks like fussiness. It is stock-taking. In the morning, you can stand at the door with a candle and know in 3 seconds whether anything is missing or anything is still dirty. The china goes back up in baskets and is no longer your affair once it passes the foot of the stairs, which is a mercy, because there is a great deal of it. The larder is closed properly, which means everything in it has been dealt with rather than simply put behind a door. The bones from the joint and the game go into the stockpot, which is now tomorrow's stockpot. The dripping is strained through muslin into the jar. What is left of the cold beef is covered and set on the marble where the draught crosses it. The remains of the ice have gone entirely, and the zinc lining of the safe is wiped dry, because water left in it will smell by Thursday, and you will be the one who has to find out why. Then the range. You do not put a kitchen range out, you bank it. The ashes are riddled and the clinker raked forward and lifted, and then a shovel of slack goes on the live core, and a light covering of ash over the slack, and the dampers are eased almost shut, so that the whole thing sits and breathes very slowly for the next 6 hours, without burning fuel and without going cold. The boiler at the side stays warm, which means the first jug of hot water in the morning is a matter of turning a tap rather than waiting 40 minutes. It is a small piece of craft, and there are cooks who never quite learn it, and their kitchens run late every single day of their lives without them ever locating the reason. By something like 1:45, the room is a kitchen again, bare table, scrubbed pale and damp, still smelling of sand, floor swept and the cloths hung, the scullery empty and the sink dry and the drain flushed, the copper cooling on its shelf, ticking very faintly as it contracts. The maid has gone up and the kitchen maid after her, and you have said good night to both of them and told the scullery maid she did well tonight, which is true, and which she will remember longer than you will. You are the last person awake in the house. There is a candle on the corner of the table, and you sit down at last, and the sitting down is a physical event, and you take a moment over it. Then you pull the book toward you. Pencil, because ink in a kitchen is a nonsense. You turn to the pages you want, and you write against 3 of the 16 names. Against the gentleman who cannot take rich sources, you write nothing new, because he behaved exactly as the page said he would, and confirmation needs no ink. Against the lady who has now left shellfish untouched at this table 3 times, you underline what is already there, twice, so that whoever holds this book after you cannot possibly miss it. Against the guest who ate almost nothing at all, you write only the date and a short note about what she did take, which was the clear soup and a little of the plain roast and no wine, and you make no guess in writing, because a written guess about a person's health has a way of becoming a stated fact once it has been read by 3 people, and you have seen the damage that does. Against the one who told the table he cannot bear a plain dish, and then had a second helping of the plainest thing on the menu, you write the truth in 5 words, and you allow yourself the small pleasure of it. And then you turn to a fresh page and write the thing that is worth more than any of it, which is the note about the pudding. Which mould, how long it stood, which corner of the larder, the proportion of cream to custard, the fact that it went up at 9 minutes past 10 and was eaten out of the mould entirely, and that it will therefore stand for 10 minutes, but very likely not 15, and that the next time there are 16 at table in July, you will make it a fraction firmer and send it earlier. That page is for a dinner 2 years from now, in a house that may not be this house, for people you have not met. You close the book. You do not lock it away, because there is nowhere to lock it, and nobody to hide it from. Nobody upstairs has ever asked to see it. It has not occurred to them that it exists. Consider what actually happened in this house today, and who did it. 16 people were fed, in 9 courses, to a written plan, at a fixed hour, in a room 2 floors above a coal fire, from ingredients that arrived in the wrong sizes, by 3 women, one of whom is 19 and one of whom is 15. A fish came in undersized, and the menu absorbed it without a mark. A sauce broke and was replaced inside 20 minutes. A woman in half mourning was given food she could accept without having to explain herself. A man, who has been told to avoid butter, ate a full dinner without once being confronted with a dish he would have to refuse in front of company. An abstainer's glass was never empty and never remarked upon. None of that was hospitality in the abstract. All of it was a decision made by a person in a basement holding a pencil in the 90 seconds she had to make it. The skill was real. The judgment was real. And it was the kind of judgment that cannot be taught out of a book, because it is made of 4 years of watching the same faces, and 11 years before that of watching other faces. And the satisfaction is real too, and it is worth saying so plainly, because there is a way of telling this story that turns you into nothing but a grievance, and that is not accurate either. You are good at something difficult. Tonight you did it well. You know you did it well, and the knowledge is yours regardless of who else has it, and your name is written down nowhere in connection with any of it, not on the menu card, which is in French, in a fair hand, and does not carry a signature, not in the letters of thanks that will arrive on Thursday morning, not in the recollection of any of the 16 who will say, if they say anything, that they dined very well in Bloomsbury and that their hostess keeps an excellent table. That sentence is the whole of your public existence. It is not even a sentence about you. Grammatically, the achievement belongs to the woman who chose the fish course with you at 10 o'clock this morning, and she will accept it gracefully, and she will not be lying, because in the language available to her, that is simply how the thing is said. Your name appears in 2 places in the world. One is the wage book, where it sits beside £35 a year, paid quarterly. The other is the character. A character is a few lines written by an employer for the next employer, and it is the only portable property a servant has. Not a certificate, not a qualification held in your own hand, issued by any body that examined you. A private opinion, in someone else's handwriting, over which you have no control and against which there is no appeal, offered or withheld at will. 18 years of work, 3 kitchens, the whole of what you can do, reduced to whatever the woman upstairs decides to say about you in 5 lines, and every cook knows the arithmetic behind it. This position exists as long as this household exists, in this form. If the family reduces its establishment, if the practice takes them out of London, if the children grow and the house closes, if the household simply changes its mind, then a cook of 38 goes to the registry office in the morning carrying that piece of paper and nothing else, and stands in a room full of women doing the same. No pension, no claim on the 4 years, no transfer of any part of what is written in the pencil book, which is worth more than the paper and cannot be shown to anybody, because there is no one in the world who would understand what they were looking at. That is not a complaint about the family in this house. They are ordinary employers, neither cruel nor curious. It is a description of the structure the 2 of you are standing in, at opposite ends of it, and only one of you has to know how it works in order to survive the week. You pinch the candle down to a low flame and take it up off the table. Behind you, the range gives off the last of its heat in a slow, steady push against your back, iron cooling by degrees under its ash, and the copper on the shelf has gone quiet at last. The larder door is shut. The area door is bolted. You cross the flags and go up the stone stairs with your hand flat on the wall, and above you, the house is going quiet floor by floor, the drawing room already dark, a line of light under one door on the second landing, and then not even that. The candle carries as far as the next turn of the stair, and no further, and that is far enough.